Yes, hello, my beautiful friends. It is an amazing day, and welcome back. We have a heck of a stream planned ahead. It was a busy one out there. We're going to wait for those tubes to fire up. Then we're going to jump into what we're covering on the day before we actually get into it, because there's a nice preview that I can share with you now. You can see the president, Donald Trump, was out, and he is pointing our attention to a very interesting report that was dropped by Barry Loudermilk and Republicans on the House Oversight Committee. And so we'll take a look at this, because what it is telling us is that Trump is exonerated on the January 6th issue. One of the key narratives that Liz Cheney and the Democrats had been saying was that Trump wanted the insurrection to happen. How can he want something to happen if he was asking for the place to be secured? Well, this press release from the Committee on the House Administration, Chairman Brian Steele, tells us that the transcripts, the actual transcripts that have been buried from us for a very long time, show that Trump directed the Pentagon to keep January 6th safe. Pentagon ignored this. And so these transcripts are now out. In the series of the transcripts, you'll see that there's a bunch of different quotes that will parse through, including quotes from Christopher Miller, the acting Secretary of Defense, Mark Milley, Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff over at the DOD, and Chief Stephen Sund, U.S. Capitol Hill Chief of Police. And we'll see what he says he was told from the Army. So there's a lot to get to. I also want to zoom in on the actual transcript itself, which we will pull up here, because there's one from Mark Milley, and you can see, I'll share this with you since we need to now pull this up. This is the actual PDF document, and inside of it is what we will be reading. And so let's make sure we have this appropriately queued up, downloaded, and ready to go. All right, there we go. All right, my apologies. I thought I had that queued up earlier, but your boy sometimes thinks a tab is open when it's not open. You know how that is. All right, so tab problems. Gosh. All right, so sound like the Secret Service or something. Now, then we're going to turn our attention, and we're going to talk about Tish's $489 million civil judgment. You remember Tish James, the Attorney General for New York? You know, New York's going through it right now. Their Diddy just got indicted, and Mayor Adams just got indicted. We went through that full indictment for our members this morning. We'll have a segment on that coming out soon. But they were in the New York appeals court, and they were arguing over whether or not Tish's judgment against Donald Trump, President Trump, can stand. And it did not start out well for Letitia, Tishy Letitia. And it was good, because this judge right here he cuts off the government's attorney right as she starts speaking. And you don't see that happen. You do see it happen often, but he comes out with a certain type of fury in this. And so we'll listen through it. We have Tish's attorneys were here. We have Trump's attorneys, John Sauer. You'll recognize his voice as usual, who was there, and we'll listen through to the arguments. But from what it sounded like from the bit that we listened to before today, looks like Tish's team didn't have a good showing. And then we'll turn our attention to what happened at the very first ever bipartisan task force hearing that took place on the first Trump assassination attempt. You can see the task force has created their own page at taskforce.house.gov. This investigation is now well underway. We'll see what it sounded like, because there was a bunch of testimony today from different individuals who were there, and this is what the leadership looks like. This is the makeup of the committee. You may recognize some of these people, some you may not. But we'll poke around and we'll see what some of the conversation sounded like, because there were some very good questions. In fact, from Jason Crow, Clay Higgins had an interesting exchange. And then they actually brought in some Republicans to come in and discuss what they found. Eli Crane and others, who I think are ex-Navy SEALs and so on, they came in and they actually testified. And so we'll poke around through some of the highlights and we'll see what it sounded like, because there was also some difficulty there. Apparently, when Corey Mills, this congressman, when he came in to testify, the Democrats stormed out of there. Democrats walked out on the committee hearing. They said, we're not sitting for this. We're not going to hear these Republicans testify. This is outrageous. And so they decided that they've got better things to do. And so we'll go through all these stories. We'll poke through and see what happened at the task force hearing, because there were some very good questions. They even talked about that water tower that was back behind Trump and whether there was somebody perched up on there. And we'll see what that testimony sounded like. But before we get into any of that, you know what we have to do. Get prepared, my friends, because the world is getting more unpredictable by the day. We've got political insanity, rumors of civil war. We've got an unstable stock market. And now we've got the looming threat of a global health emergency that's coming down the pike. Now, did you know that there's a bird flu summit that's coming here in October? It's eerily reminiscent of Event 201 that foreshadowed the COVID sitch. And get this, the first topic, as you can see, is mass fatality management planning. If that doesn't sound chills down your spine, well, I don't know what will. But here's the good news. You don't have to be scared if you're prepared. Our friends at the Wellness Company created the Medical Emergency Kit, and every home in America should have at least one of these. They're packed with life-saving meds like ivermectin, amoxicillin, even Z-Pak, and it's all backed by experts like Dr. Peter McCullough. Now, imagine this. No more frantic searches. No more emergency waiting rooms. Just a few clicks, and this kit is delivered to your door. Times like these, having your medical emergency kit is not just a luxury, it's a necessity. And so protect your family now. Go to twc.health/Robert. Use code Robert. You'll save $30. Don't wait until it's too late. Act now. Take control. Ensure you are protected for whatever comes next. twc.health/Robert. Use code Robert. You'll save $30 and you'll get free shipping. And make sure you're prepared right now, my friends, with the Wellness Company. And so thanks to the Wellness Company for sponsoring today's episode, and thanks for supporting our sponsors, my friends, and for getting prepared. All right, let's get to it. Now, without any further ado, some big news on the day. President Trump is now pointing to a total exoneration found very conveniently for us in the transcripts and in the quotes of people like General Mark Milley, Christopher Miller, things that Capitol Hill Chief of Police Stephen Sund heard from the Secretary of the Army that were all buried in redacted filings, in redacted documents that are now available to the public. And you can see we're going to read through this because there's a bunch of stuff that is not available for our curious eyes that has been redacted. And this is from the interview of General Mark Milley that happened right after January 6th. We'll read through it and see what he said. But what's curious about this is the most damning thing that he said, per the quote seen here, seems like it is behind the redactions. I'll show you what I mean very shortly. But here's what the president said. He said, shocking, breaking news, as exposed by the great John Solomon, shout out to our friends at Just the News, a real journalist who cares about the truth and the great work of Congressman Barry Loudermilk and the Republicans on the House Oversight Committee, the deep state chose to disregard my direct authorization of at least 10,000 January 6th National Guard to ensure that D.C. was safe and secure on that day. Now, these deep state subversives disobeyed the president's directives, which would have prevented any unrest that day. January 6th, as it is known, would never have taken place if this order would have been implemented. And we're going to show you that Milley got the order, according to this congressional report, on January 6th. And remember that Mayor Muriel Bowser also denied his specific request to send over 10,000 people. She said, no, we're good. Leave us alone. And they were freaked out about that. They said, we didn't want Trump to stand up an army and take over the Capitol. Then they didn't secure the building. Like, why did Trump not secure the Capitol? Okay, guys, which one would you like to have happen? So then Trump continues. He says, these revelations end the sham January 6 civil hoaxes, and the lawless D.C. case brought by deranged Jack Smith, who's illegitimate according to the Florida federal court, which has already been demolished by the United States Supreme Court's historic immunity and Fisher decision. Now, I called for everyone to act peacefully and patriotically on that day and demanded that D.C. be protected. But the deep state and crazy Nancy Pelosi, who admitted to her daughter on videotape that she was responsible, have to be held to account, including for the damages, the wasted resources, and the time spent defending the witch hunt and hoaxes. We have to save our broken democracy. And that's from President Trump. And he's right. Nancy Pelosi is responsible for a lot of problems, as we're going to continue to see. But here was Trump speaking today, explaining that Pelosi is the one who should be prosecuted. He tried to secure the Capitol on this day, and she denied that from happening. Here was Trump speaking today during a national press briefing.
And Nancy Pelosi has a little problem because her husband sold their Visa stock. They had a lot of Visa stock one day before Visa was announced that Visa is being sued by the Department of Justice. Think of that. Nancy Pelosi sold vast amounts of Visa stock one day before the big lawsuit that we all read about a few days ago was brought against Visa. You think it was luck? I don't think. She should be prosecuted. Nancy Pelosi should be prosecuted for that. And she should also be prosecuted for J6 because she turned down 10,000 or any number she wanted, soldiers or National Guard. And I hope you all read John Solomon and what John Solomon wrote 2 days ago, because if you read it, you'd see that Donald Trump did absolutely nothing wrong. It's a scam. It's a scam. It
was, and they set it up. They had a bunch of federal agents there. We've covered it. We estimated, just from the Proud Boys trial, from the testimony, the defense team from our read of the exculpatory was they tried to admit evidence of 50 CHS government, let's call them government-affiliated individuals, okay? Because they always say, well, it's not an official CHS, so it doesn't count. Well, was it an informant? Well, it's not an official informant. Okay, did you talk to anybody with a pulse who is a human or identifies in any way, shape, or form? Well, it's against policy to talk about. Gosh! Okay, you know, and you can't figure it out. So it's an endless battle. Thomas Massie has been at the forefront of it. But you remember Pelosi. I've been waiting for this. She had her daughter there recording a documentary as this whole thing was going on. Then they created fake pipe bombs that nobody can find. Where's the pipe bomber? Anyone know? No. Why was Kamala Harris tiptoeing around the pipe bomb when it was right in front of the DNC? No one has any idea. Why was the video frame rate recorded at potato level quality, like you pick from your garden and then, you know, put some wires in it? That's what they recorded it with for their security cameras outside the DNC, because the FBI downgraded it or whatever happened to it. No one knows. Then the FBI we learned from Thomas Massie, they don't even have the recording facing the location. Text messages all gone. And they blame Trump for this. It's not even his Capitol building, okay? He controls the White House. They control the Capitol. And as we'll see, there is a mound of evidence that shows Trump did everything humanly possible to secure the building and to secure the Capitol. And they rejected him. They delayed any possibility of that happening. So from Washington, what we're seeing is John Solomon in conjunction with Barry Loudermilk and all these guys are bringing this to light. They released this report. They say the DOD IG report, so the independent report came out and said that they did a great job. But what they show is evidence in direct opposition to the original report. Now you'll see these are the statements that they have assembled for us. And we have this in this format. Assembled from Representative Barry Loudermilk and the Oversight Administration. These are statements that they say came from a list of transcripts. And let me share with you how this looks. So when you go over here to pull up the transcripts, and I was doing this today as we were prepping for the show, what you'll notice is you have a whole directory of these transcripts. Now, one thing that I wanted to pay special attention to was the key quotes that we're expecting to find in the document. So we now we have the actual transcript of General Mark Milley, as we see here. So let's see if we can tighten this up. No, that's not what we want. All right, so here we go back to the transcript, and we're looking for the specific quote that they're referencing here. So for example, they say, previously concealed by the Biden-Harris administrations, DOD, when we had the J6 committee, we had Liz Cheney and Benny Thompson doing their little book report with their fake testimony that created new questions that was changed by people like Clavicle Girl, who told us weird fantasy stories about Trump reaching in, grabbing someone by the clavicle that never happened. And that story only came about after her third meeting with Liz Cheney, once they had, a couple of whatever they were drinking, spritzers or something, I don't know. But then they come to a new story. She comes out, she shoves it down everyone's face. Clavicle Girl, shocking story. All the rest of it gets buried because they had a story to tell. They actually even brought in a Hollywood producer, whoever that guy was. So they tell us, now all of this was previously concealed. And now the subcommittee has uncovered statements by key personnel involved in the deployment of the DC National Guard to the Capitol. These new transcripts indicate that senior Pentagon officials unnecessarily delayed the DC National Guard's response to the Capitol on January 6th, and they did part of that due to optics concerns, because we don't want to send a bunch of troops in there. Now, the DOD Inspector General claims that the actions at the Pentagon were reasonable in light of the circumstances because, they probably play golf together or whatever. At the Capitol, the IG also determined that the DOD officials did not delay or obstruct the DOD's response, and so they did a great job. But they say, no, liars. The transcripts actually reveal otherwise, and so this is part of a continuing cover-up. So here are some quotes. And now I wanted to show you where this is saying this quote came from. So you see this red arrow, this red asterisk right here. If we zoom in on that, see how it's red on the screen? Compare that to this one, which looks like it is a purple. This one's a red one, and so on. Well, they have a little legend down here, and so we can see where this came from. And so this red dot says it came from the DOD Inspector General. Okay, so from that specific document. So we're following the chain, following the bouncing ball. So this quote from Milley presumably is then coming from this document, which is from the IG's office, right? Same concept. So we're going to come back to this transcript to see if we can find the quote that is allegedly ascribed to Mark Milley in the document. And then when we do not find it in the document, we're going to ask ourselves why. Let's see if we can piece this together. Now, here is the quote. General Mark Milley, Chairman, Joint Chiefs of Staff. On January 3rd, the president just says, this is a quote, hey, look at this. There's going to be a large amount of protesters here on the 6th. Make sure that you have sufficient National Guard or soldiers to make sure it's a safe event. That sounds like a directive, doesn't it? Make sure you've got soldiers to make sure it's a safe event. Do that, he said it twice, is what Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, is saying that Trump told him on January 3rd, 3 days before January 6th. That would have been nice of Mark Milley to come in there and tell that to Liz Cheney and America. No, Trump told me to secure it, because part of their entire motive here, part of the entire case, is that Trump had a guilty mind. He had a mens rea. He wanted to steal the election. How do you steal the election? By inciting an insurrection. And then I don't really know what else they thought was going to happen. Like they were going to take the podium from Lectern guy and the nuclear codes are in there or something. And then Trump just has command and control operations of the whole country with joysticks or something. I have no idea. But apparently that was enough. And then all the Congress people were going to be dragged in there with leashes on and dragged to go vote. Vote for him or else or something. It was lunacy, but okay. If Trump is going to secure the Capitol, that whole narrative crumbles. So obviously they're going to want to bury these things. They don't want any of us to know that he was telling the DOD, secure everything. 2 orders in 1 statement on the 3rd. Milley reports that POTUS said, hey, I don't care if you use guard or soldiers or active duty soldiers or you go there yourself, Mark Milley. You have to just go over there. Just make sure it's safe. Okay, again, so another red arrow. So presumably that is coming from the same DOD document that we've got queued up. Now we'll come back to Milley, but here are some other quotes. So from Christopher Miller, the acting Secretary of Defense, he said specifically to this, in this transcript, which as you saw was in the directory that Congress has chronicled for us. So we've got Milley is here. We've got Miller is down here. And you can go through these. They're all just on the government website at the Congressional House page. But as we continue, Miller then says, the president commented that they were going to need 10,000 troops the following day. I interpreted it as a bit of presidential banter or President Trump banter that you're all familiar with. And in no way, shape, or form did I interpret that as an order or direction. Well, that's interesting because he told Milley, make sure, twice, make sure. Then Christopher Miller says, on January 6th, everyone was like, did you listen to the president's speech? I'm like, the guy speaks for 90 minutes. It's like Castro or something. No, I've got work to do. Said the acting Secretary of Defense under President Trump. Okay, he's like, no, that guy's like Castro or something. Guy's a piece of work. It's like, what are you doing? Do you even support the president at all? The guy speaks for 90 minutes like a communist. No, I've got work to do. I didn't even listen to it. He said, I was cognizant of the fears that the president would evoke the Insurrection Act to politicize the military in an anti-democratic manner. Remember that? They were all saying that. Trump cannot allow the National Guard to come into the Capitol. If he does, that means he's going to seize the country. And then something bad happens and they blame Trump anyways. And just before the Electoral College certification, 10 former secretaries of defense signed an op-ed piece in the Washington Post warning of the dangers of inappropriately using the military. They were saying there's no way. No such thing was going to occur on my watch. We were never going to let Trump or anybody at the executive branch inappropriately use the military. So Trump's own people who apparently hate the guy, like Christopher Miller, 90 minutes, I like him. Guy speaks forever. I got work to do. More important things. Like what? Not securing the Capitol, evidently. Well done, Christopher. Now, there was absolutely no way I was putting U.S. military forces at the Capitol, period. He said, I'm just not going to do it. And now they're prosecuting Trump for that decision. Trump said the opposite. Trump said, do whatever you have to. I don't care. National Guard, active duty, whatever. Do whatever. Just make sure it's safe. Okay, well, if you're not going to put U.S. military forces on there, what else are you going to do? What's your other alternative? If it's not the military. The operational plan was this. Let's take the National Guard and keep them away from the Capitol. So that was your plan. So Trump gave you an order. You said National Guard is the best solution, and then you kept them away from the Capitol, almost like you maybe wanted to leave the building vulnerable. Indirect contravention to what Trump said. So then we have the Capitol Hill Chief of Police, Stephen Sund, who is a hero, by the way. He wrote an amazing book, and I was going to flag it because I have the hard copy somewhere, but we had a water main break, and so it's a little bit in disarray right now. But he wrote a great book, and he said this when he was responding to this. Guy's just caught in the total broadside of a rigged insurrection enabled by the rest of the intelligence agencies. He's just like, here. And he got pinned with all this. They fired him immediately, asked for his resignation. He got pinned with the whole thing, even though it's not his fault at all. So he said, I'm making an urgent request for the National Guard. We are being overrun. I gave a quick rundown of what we had going on and that officers out there are fighting for their lives, he said. We were about to be taken over. The representative from the Secretary of Army said, well, I don't like the optics of the National Guard standing in line with the Capitol in the background. Don't like the optics. Yeah. And I explained to them that the building is being breached, though. I need their assistance immediately, he said. Now, my recommendation to the Secretary of the Army is to not support the request, General Piatt said. Well, I don't care. Sorry. Let it happen, man. Which is weird to think about. Like, what if this was an actual attack by some other country that had some operational, don't need that many people, evidently. How many violent offenders were there on January 6th? They've charged 15 to 1,800 people, I believe. I don't even know what the final numbers are. They keep going up and up and up, but it's less than 2,000. And it's something that they didn't respond to with this level of seriousness. Okay, so Stephen's son is saying here this is very serious. They're saying not really. I don't like the optics of it. So no one's dying, so just sit there and take it. Almost like they were in cahoots with Milley or something. And the recommendation is they're not even supporting the request for support. So then Commander General William Walker says, my thoughts are that there has to be something else at play here. Why is there such a concern about proximity to the Capitol? We hadn't had that before. Why do they want to keep them away from the Capitol? Why are they denying our requests? General Piatt said, according to Commanding General William Walker, General Piatt said at 2:42 p.m., he said, it would not be his best military advice to send the National Guard to the U.S. Capitol at this time. Military presence could make the situation worse, and the optics were bad. Colonel Earl Matthews, D.C. National Guard, said, yeah, the D.C. Guard could have gone in right away from the interviews, but the Secretary of the Army did not give us the approval. Yeah, there was concern about being anywhere near the Capitol because of the perception that the military would be involved, but there would be militarization, that there would be a militarization of the electoral process is what they said. We were seeing the Congress of the United States being overrun, and the Guard and the Capitol Police, the MPD, need help. All right, no matter what you think of the situation, like that should absolutely never happen. The building gets overrun where all the Congress people are, like it's lunacy. We saw that in movies, which is a weird thing to even think about. Sort of the persuasion with, remember the building, White House Down or whatever those were, where the Capitol building got overran with that one actor and whatever. And then they did that, and then the visual comes out. It's kind of like pre-programming people. It's strange when you go that off, but it's an insane thing to think about. The building was so unsecured that a bunch of people without any firearms at all, and just a lot of pushing and shoving and throwing of empty water bottles and things, with some flagpoles, yes, and there was some violence, yes, but when you actually parse out, and we did the numbers on this, I don't know how many, a year ago, parse out the violent offense from the other violent offenses, and we went through one of the indictments, assault on a police officer was an empty water bottle hitting some cop. Okay. Yes, we know. And the COVID infections counted and all the things. So yes, the horrific pain and abuse, I get it. Now, here, the point remains, the Capitol should never be overrun, ever, at any point, ever. And you would just suspect that, but they allowed it to happen. So is it incompetence or is it complicity? I think we know. Now, we had people at the D.C. Armory who were able to help, and they're not moving, and they're not allowed to move. They're not allowed to go down there. It'd be like if there's a 5-alarm fire and you're telling a volunteer fire company, hey, don't go respond to the fire. Go to the trees and pull cats and dogs out of the trees to free up firemen to respond to the real fire. I mean, it's ridiculous, said this colonel. Shout out to Colonel Earl Matthews. Command Sergeant Major Michael Brooks, D.C. National Guard, said they were ready to go, and they just couldn't understand why they were still sitting there. Literally sitting on a bus, just waiting to drive to the Capitol and do the best they could to support the Capitol Police. People were like, why weren't you there? We were just there waiting. We repeatedly told them, we know what we're doing. We just need to give us the authorization. Just let us go. But no. Brigadier General Aaron Dean, Adjutant General, DC National Guard, says, I thought to myself, okay, I'm not sure why we're concerned about optics when it comes to, saving lives and preventing damage and loss of property, but okay. So you don't like the optics of what? A secure Capitol building? You prefer the optics of a totally ransacked building riddled with federal agents all over the place? Egged on by guys like Ray Epps? Huh. Those optics were better for them because it was all part of the intelligence operation, which enabled them to impeach Trump, which they almost were successful at. And then when they were not successful at making sure that he could not run again, because some senators, thankfully, stood their ground on that one, they then turned it into an 8-part episode of Liz Cheney explaining to us about this insurrection and how it's the greatest attack on American democracy since the Civil War, forgetting about Pearl Harbor, forgetting about 9/11, forgetting about all of the other things that resulted in a lot more harm than anything that happened on J6. But the optics were exactly what they wanted. They wanted this to look bad because it was how they were going to smear Trump and MAGA. Now, the lull time between 2:30 p.m. and 5 o'clock, just nothing. We just sat there. And they, remember, part of their key narrative on all of this is that Trump just sat around. Trump just sat around on his butt, they said, Liz Pelosi. He just sat around on his butt. You delayed the response for your jurisdiction. Your house is on fire. You're looking over to Trump's house in the next city over, which is what DC is basically, right? It's the executive branch versus the legislative branch. Separate but equal, Nancy. He can't put your fire out. Liz, it's not his responsibility to do that. And they try to say like he was in charge of all of those people, which was never the case. Now, they try to blame him for this delay in time when they caused the delay. Brigadier General Aaron Dean is confirming that. The lull in time, it was just a little odd, very odd. It put us in a bad situation because we wanted to respond, but we couldn't. So we were just left there waiting on the word to go and couldn't go. Another one, General Walter Piatt, General Director of the Army Staff. He says, what we were afraid of is that military assets would be employed without military command. And that weighed heavily when forces were requested in support of J6. Now, Christopher Rodriguez, Homeland, he said, so it kind of shocked me because we had a situation where the Metro PD had been on the scene at the Capitol for over an hour at that point, and we couldn't get any additional support from the DOD. Guys like Mark Milley, who got a direct order from Trump and reported that. Trump said, make sure it's a safe event. This document looks brutal, all this red. There's a lot in here. So all of these people, okay, Joint Chiefs of Staff, right? DOD, he's the person who's got all the sway with all these guys. Acting Secretary of Defense. He's got the thumb on all these generals, colonels, brigadier generals, Homeland Security, Director of Army Staff. So it's coming from him. Now we go into his actual report, and I want to share this with you because I was trying to find specifically where this came from. So if we just go in and search for even the word safe, right? Let's search for safe event and see if we can target that in this transcript here. And we're going to find that we're not able to if this is the same thing that happened when I was doing this earlier. So we'll say safe event. See, 0 for 0 on this. Not showing up. Let's just try the word safe. All right, not showing up. Let's try the word, if we can just make sure that it's working. Let's see if the word review shows up just to make sure this is working. There it is, as you can see. So it's working, but safe is not there and safe event is not there. All right, so what does that mean? Well, that specific phrase is not in this document, which they linked us to from their source. So this is the main press release from the House Committee on the House Administration. And as we saw, they tell us that this quote came over, right? They're releasing this. This is it. The president said all the things that we just read. Hey, so, and they say here, POTUS said, I don't care if you use the Guard, active duty soldiers, whatever you do. And Miller responds by saying, hey, we've got a plan and we've got it covered. All right, so that's from the transcripts. Now, when you actually link over to this transcript, you click this link here, that's what takes us to this very document that we were searching for the materials. So they link us specifically to this page, and presumably what that means is that it is in these redactions, okay? Which is a cover-up. These redactions are exculpatory material to President Trump. They show specifically if those quotes match what they say they are. Okay, if this quote is behind those redactions in that transcript, which we can't see or confirm, it goes in direct opposition to the allegations made by Jack Smith in the J6 case. That he wanted all of this to happen. He clearly did not. He gave a direct order to everybody to make sure this does not happen. So let's zoom in on this so we can get some context on what went down in this interview. The Deputy Inspector General for the DOD, Office of the Inspector General, sat down with General Mark Milley just a few months after January 6th occurred on April 16th. And here's what that conversation sounded like. General Milley is here, and the questioning began as follows. Today is April 16th. Time is 1:57. I am redacted with the DOD, Office of the Inspector General. On the phone is my colleague so-and-so. The witness is here, General Mark Milley. And Milley's lawyer is here too. We're seated in the Pentagon today. And so-and-so and I are located in our telework locations in Virginia, and we're continuing our interview here. Now, Mr. Milley, General, I ask you to acknowledge this interview is being recorded, Milley says. Yes, this is General Milley, General Mark Milley. I acknowledge that this interview is being recorded by the Department of Defense IG. And you've got a copy of the Privacy Act notice. He says, I acknowledge that I have a copy of the DOD IG Privacy Act notice. Now, General, as we discussed prior to going on the record, I'll let you go through that document. Now, General Milley, you were talking about the timelines you had. Milley says, yeah, so I'm using a timeline, a printed timeline that I had the team kind of put together of various activities. We're going to provide you with a variety of documents. I don't want to imply that I'm certifying all these documents. That's quite a laundry list of documents here. But I'm using this timeline as a reference to help jog my memory as to what happened at various points in time. And we've already done testimony up through the 5th here, although I'm happy to answer any follow-up questions on that. So what my intent would be right now would be to go ahead and start on the 6th as to what I can recall of the events on the day of the 6th, and then pause for any questions you may have. Over. Thank you. Yes, we'll start discussing what happened on the 6th. And again, we ask you to please be as thorough as possible. Provide any times, meetings, and other things. Anything that's relevant. He says, okay, I'll do that. So on the... Oh, you want me to start? Yes, please. Now, what you're going to see is Milley, I think he's going to give us a big, long explanation. So this is going to be a big monologue from Milley. I think he's probably reading for something. I don't know what happened here in this portion of the document, but they're not there. Then we get into these big redactions, as you'll see. And they're numerous, so let's see what they left out, which we believe is exculpatory material. And the presumption is, how do we know the quotes came from this? Well, Congress is linking to this document, saying this is where they came from. And they're not showing up in there in a search. We'll read through it, see if it pops out to us. But they must have gotten a briefing, confidential or otherwise, that revealed to them what's behind those redactions. So here's General Milley. White Rage Milley says, okay, so again, now I'm referencing essentially what amounts to a joint staff log of various events. And so it reads, And this is JOIC. JOIC is part of our Joint Command and Control Command downstairs. So it's got an entry at midnight, and so we'll start there. So he's just running down a log. So he says, okay, at 001 at 6 January, I'm reading this log. Well, there was no observed civil disturbances. POTUS will make remarks at 11. Upon completion, there will be a crowd. Congress will begin a session, larger than expected crowds, colder than average temperatures on the night. So he says, so what that is that's a log entry by the joint staff and kind of the watch officers that are over the night. So they just logged it in there. Now, typically on a given day, I'll show up at the office at about 0700 and I'll typically take an 0730 joint staff brief. Now, on this particular day, on January 6th, at about 10 minutes and 700, according to the log, I received a briefing from the overnight watch folks for the J3 section, and the log entry reads, quote, estimated size of the protest to be 20,000, and the reports that the chairman receives the briefing that reports that the FBI assesses no credible threats and security is within the capability and the purview of the Metro PD. And that's logged in on January 6th at 6:47 in the morning and on the slide that I'm looking at. Big break in the transcripts. Now at 7:30, a couple minutes later, I get my morning brief, says General Milley. Update briefing, and it goes over a lot of things. It's not just the events of the 6th, it's other things too. Redacted, 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 redacted. Now I'm looking at log 851-0851. The log reads, FBI shares, quote, an internal only update dated 0700 hours. It's identifying potential flashpoints, points across the United States, meaning other cities. He says, quote, reporting indicates individuals planned or are advocating for travel to Washington, D.C. to engage in civil unrest and violence. The day of at 8:51. So J33, which is the watch officers, they go ahead and they further distribute that little note throughout the Joint Staff and the DOD, and that's at 8:51. So then we have this big paragraph, and I'd really like to read it. So they get a warning, right? This, maybe it's in here. And this report comes in. Oh, FBI. I wonder, in other words, if Trump got this briefing, right? Did Trump get awareness of this? Milley got this briefing. So then something happened. That's 8:51. So-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so. Redacted, redacted, redacted. You could theoretically put in there. So the White House was alerted to this, and you could easily insert the other portion of the transcript, which I have just massacred here with this red ink. But if you said, okay, yeah, and then so they contacted the White House, and the president says, hey, look at this. There's going to be a large amount of protesters. Make sure they got sufficient National Guard there. POTUS said, I don't care if you use Guard or soldiers, just do whatever. Miller says, hey, we've got a plan. We've got it covered. SecDef. Let's see if SecDef was at that meeting. But you could, in other words, just take that and shove that in there, and we can play this game as we go through this document. So maybe that happened there. I don't know. So that event conference didn't pull in the SecDef, myself, or the White House, or any of those folks. So maybe there's another, maybe we should talk to the White House about what they want to do. At 9:39 again, referring to the log, says Milley, as he's going through this testimony, and we'll provide this log and all that to you. Acting SecDef Miller is requesting periodic updates on DC and the protest. The same guy who just said that Trump's like Castro and he can't believe he talks for 90 minutes. Boring. The log notes he is particularly interested in indicators and warnings of the numbers that will exceed if the numbers exceed 20,000. Let him know. And he says, well, so the log reads, now he views the crowd size larger than 20,000 as critical information that may require he and or the chairman, me, says Milley, to notify the White House. Oh, here it comes. So that gets transmitted down to the watch folks to make sure they're on board there. Now, what does this redaction say? So curious. Redacted, redacted. So critical information that may require me to notify the White House. Okay, so we say that back down to the watch board folks. Is this where we can insert this magical paragraph that we never saw because Liz Cheney hid it from us? Where it says, yeah, so it went down to the White House and the president said, hey, look at this. Just make sure it's safe. Just make sure you've got sufficient soldiers there to make sure it's safe. I wonder if that could be in this little paragraph. I don't know. Now, at 10:49, it talks about the Joint Staff LNO to the FBI informs our watch that the crowd size is estimated to be 25,000, with no reports of any civil disobedience or of other civil disturbance as of 1000 hours. Additionally, the liaison officer to the FBI reports that the FBI says there is no credible threat at this time. So again, what's Trump supposed to do at this moment? Now, that was a log entry at 10:49 on January 6. Another sentence is redacted. At around, I don't know, it's somewhere in the, General Milley says, I don't have an exact time, but it's somewhere in the range of 11:30 is what my pencil note says. But on this log, it could be 1100. It could be 10:45. It's in that range. I don't know. We could get a time. I'm not sure where we get it, but I guess we can go downstairs and they probably have a computer somewhere. So-and-so, 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 so-and-so. So at 11:10, the National Guard J3 operations officer and the deputy J3 here on the joint staff, Milley's still going through this. He says, well, we get an update about the National Guard's deployment status, etc., in the city, and it says nothing. The log entry reads, okay, nothing significant to report, where the National Guard are, etc. 11:20, another FBI report. He says, nothing specific there, no credible threat, no actionable intel, blah, blah, blah. 11:55, the log reads, the President Trump is giving a speech at the Ellipse. New update came in. Notification. Oh, hey. You could probably verify that for accuracy if that's the time. Now, I'm not sure what time he actually started his speech, but it's in the log at 11:55, so we can double check that. And at noon, I would have been getting these reports, by the way. I'm reading them out of a log, but someone would have been calling me, sort of thing. Now, maybe, says Milley, he keeps going, this long monologue. I can't probably remember every single one of these reports. I can't. But the log is, I'm quite sure my guys are pretty good about letting me know this stuff. So I probably would have been getting these reports. So I had pretty good situational awareness of this stuff. So at noon, the log then says, J33 is currently monitoring protest activity the day of J6. The crowd size at the Ellipse is now estimated to be 10,000, 10.5. Overall crowds in D.C. at different locations, about 25,000. So there's no change to the D.C. National Guard mission status at that time, and no additional demonstration activities being reported. And so we saw no credible threats at that time either. And that's at about noontime, says Milley. And I would have been in receipt of that report, and that's what's in the log, so I would have gotten it. And then at 12:26, now I don't remember this one, says Milley, but at 12:26, there's a log entry here that says, reports of a planned. They mean plan. So reports of a plan to storm the FBI at 1400. And an armed suspect is reported in a tree on 16 Constitution Avenue. But no mention of capital threats, says Milley. So I think my guys are probably just monitoring the police reporting at that point. And I don't particularly remember that entry, but it's in there. And then so I'm here essentially during that time. I'm in my office. I'm watching the president's speech. Reports are coming in, 10,000 or so down at the Ellipse, 25 in the city as a whole. No significant civil disturbance at that point, but I'm about to begin, as I remember, I don't remember when it started, but I'm about to begin meeting with the transition team, whose leader is Dr. Christine Warmuth. She's the head of Biden's transition team. And I'm about to do a transition team meeting with her in my office, and so that's where we're at. Great. Now, the log says at 13:05, demonstrators began to march toward the Capitol. Yeah, so he's in the office with Dr. Christine. Now, I'm at that meeting now with Christine. You have the log from the Army. This log says Sec Army DC Mayor hold a conference. It says Sec Army at 13:08 gives an update. Now, I wouldn't have necessarily known this. I'm in a meeting with Christine. But going down the log here, at 13:09, somebody hands me a copy, according to this log, somebody hands me a copy of V. POTUS's statement, which is Mike Pence's statement, where he declared intent to follow the precedent of the law about the Electoral College votes. He says, I do remember that. So someone gave me that, thought it was important to not to give me a copy of that. And then at 13:24, 13:30-ish time frame, I don't know when, log says 13:24, but about half an hour into this meeting that I'm having with Dr. Christine, I get handed another piece of paper or a note or something that basically says the Capitol barricades are being bypassed or so. At 13:32, and I do remember this, says General Milley, we get the joint staff, we get informed by our LNO at the FBI of 3 pipe bombs in the vicinity of downtown D.C. No, no. At 1344, the QRF, Quick Reaction Force, I get a report the D.C. QRF is moving to the Armory. The D.C. Armory from Andrews was where Andrews Air Force Base was the staging area. 1350, Milley says, I get a report again. I'm still in this meeting with Christine Warmouth. I get a report that CNN is reporting Cannon and Madison buildings are being evacuated because there's suspicious packages that had to do with the pipe bombs. The log reads, 1400 Metro declares a riot. 1409 Capitol lockdown. Closed down at 1412. The ops officer, whomever that was at the moment, reports nothing is escalating. It's just a protest. 1413, Milley continues, there's a report of multiple suspected pipe bombs found in D.C. writ large. And then at 1429, there's a key report. We get a report of the Capitol being breached. He's like sitting there with Christine. So that's a little, those are the log entries, but that's a recap. Now I'm in a meeting with Christine Warmouth, and the sporadic reporting, pipe bombs, Capitol breach, they get into the fence, etc. There's some news reporting about this, and then I'm doing a little bit of this from memory, and I think I got a phone call from the Secretary of Defense saying, come on up here to the SecDef office immediately for a quick meeting with the Secretary of Armies and others. So I turned to the Secretary, or to Christine Warmouth, the transition team leader, and I say, I apologize, Christine, I've got to go. You can see the activity on the TV. I've got to go up to the SecDef's office, but I'll text you later, though. So the meeting with Christine ends. And I go up to the SecDef's office, and the log has it at 1430. And that's about right, according to my memory, that I'm in the SecDef's office at 1430. And so from my memory or so, this might not be 100%. So you might have to actually verify with someone else. But the office at that time, in there, we've got SecDef Miller, Sec Army McCarthy, Chief of Staff Army McConville, National Guard Bureau. I think I'm almost positive Paul Nye was in there, says Milley. I can't imagine that this meeting happened without him being there. I just don't know. But I think it happened with him there. I'm certain that Ken Rapuno was there. And in my memory, I could see Ken actually sitting at the circular table in the SecDef's office. And so, yeah, Ken Rapuno's there. Kash Patel, shout out, was there. SecDef Chief of Staff, he says, that guy's name, Gambaro. I can't remember his name. Brigadier General Gambaro. And he's like special assistant or aide kind of thing. CAG. I think he was Secretary Miller, he was there. There may have been others, I'm not sure. And then I was there with Secretary Miller. And so we all get called up there. It's like 1430 meeting. It's important. The meeting's important. I'm not sure exactly. I'm doing this from memory, says Milley. I'm not sure exactly if the timings, but the meeting lasts approximately, I'm going to say 30 minutes or so. It's in that range. So about 1430-ish to 1500-ish or something like that. And there's a lot of things happening in this meeting, and McCarthy gives a report. Says, situation downtown, the Capitol's been breached, and here's the current, like an update, friendly force update. Here's the current disposition of the forces. So here's what's happening down there with this riot sort of thing. The TV is on in the SecDef's office, and you can actually see some of this activity that's occurring on the television. And then the SecDef got some reports from some others. I think Kem Raupino and maybe others, I'm not sure. And he looks at me and others, and he says, okay, what do you think? He looks at me and he says, what do you think, Chairman? And I said to the SecDef words to the effect of, you need to alert, marshal, and mobilize the entire Washington, D.C. National Guard at this time, he says. And I looked at Dan Hokanson, and I'm making a recommendation to the SecDef. But I looked at Hokanson, I said, you need to go ahead and alert, marshal, and mobilize 1,000 National Guardsmen. And I can't remember every state, but I think I said Pennsylvania, Delaware, Virginia, West Virginia, New York, New Jersey, something like that. I rattled off a whole bunch of states like they do in the movies. For Dan Hokanson to go out and get, roughly speaking, blank, blank, blank from each state to alert, marshal, and mobilize them. And I recommend that the SecDef, that he immediately get on the phone and talk to Acting Attorney General Rosen and deploy as many federal law enforcement as well, from D.C., NCR, Capitol, and more. Get as much police as you immediately can. And the SecDef looked at McCarthy, Secretary McCarthy and McConville and Hokanson and others and said, well, what do you think? Everybody sort of agreed to all that. It was very quick. I would say that the entire set of conversations, getting an update, getting a recommendation from me, getting a recommendation from others, all that happens within 15 minutes. It's a very quick decision making, and the secretary agreed. Secretary Miller, acting Secretary Miller, he agreed to that. And he said to McCarthy, yeah, go ahead and do that. Do that with the DC Guard. And he said to Dan Hokanson, go ahead and put that out there for other states, et cetera, too. So they got that going. And then he got on the phone with Acting General Rosen. They had a discussion. Now, I don't know candidly, I can't remember if I said anything in this or not, but it was on a speakerphone. I may have said a few things, Rosen said a few things, Miller said a few things, but the gist of it was, get all the cops in DC, get them down to the Capitol. And he, by the way, was the federal lead agent. The lead was the DOJ. So he acknowledged that, and he said he was actually doing all of that, a lot of that already. And about the time somewhere in there, this meeting of the folks, they're coming in with different reports, they're handing us different pieces of paper. I remember clearly one on the shots fired inside the Capitol, Ashley Babbitt's down. And that's just adding to the sense of urgency. So they're getting sticky notes shoved in their faces. To get forces moving, get to the Capitol and do so immediately. And that's so in a decision-making meeting, I guess, if you want to call it that, in which Secretary Miller goes ahead, issues out those orders, and then the log is reading at 15:04, it says, acting SecDef with advice from the chairman and DOD senior officials provides verbal approval for full activation of the Guard at 15:04. So the log reads 15:04. And what that's telling me as I read this log here, Congressman or Inspector General, what that's telling me is that's the end of the meeting and they're logging it at 15:04 or something like that. But the actual substance happened pretty quick, and you get to the AG's phone calls as well. So from the window 14:30 to 15:04, that's another key meeting where there's a bunch more verbal orders. And I'm looking at this log here for other entries, he says. There's a lot going on. You're getting reports coming in. There's protesters breaching the Capitol. We got photos of suspected pipe bombs. He says, I actually remember that one. They handed him these, quote, suspected pipe bombs, and they brought them into that meeting. And even he's like, the hell are these? He says, let's see. It says here, 1447, Capitol Police request DC Guard assistance on behalf of Speaker Pelosi. 1447. Then at 1500, it says Sec Army and DC Mayor holds second conference call in which the DC Mayor now requests full activation of the Guard. Weird. Mayor Muriel Bowser could have agreed to that when Trump suggested it before, but she sent a nasty gram back to him and said she didn't want help from him. Now, I think what happened, says Milley, I don't know, I can't remember. I think McCarthy walked outside, went to another phone up there by the secretary's office, and he made that phone call. It says at 15:04, DC Guard commenced full mobilization. And then so that takes you up kind of to the decision making. Then there's a series of phone calls that occur, and the log says, acting SecDef and chairman, they conduct this is 15:28. So there's a series of calls. I'm not sure that, I assume these times are accurate, he says. But it says 15:28, phone call with Chairman Smith. Another phone call, acting Attorney General, acting SecDef. Here's a phone call with Pelosi, Schumer, McConnell, and Boyer. I think back up, the log says 15:30, there's another interagency call, sync. FBI, DHS are there. Another call with Miller and more. So a bunch of phone calls here. They talked to Speaker Pelosi again. I think Durbin might have been on that call, but the logs didn't show that. I think Durbin was on that one, but he didn't show up there. At 1700, there's like a cabinet level phone conference. It says acting SecDef at 1725. So there's a conference call now with the White House counsel. It doesn't say what it is, but I'm assuming it's Pat Cipollone. And what that says is they're reaffirming the Department of Justice as the lead federal agency here. At 1740, the DC National Guard finally arrives at the Capitol. There's another call, like another interagency call with a bunch of us at 1800. At 1915, there's a correction. We had another conference call, Pelosi, Schumer, McConnell, 1950. And he'll get through this list and then we'll see some questions come out. But we'll get the full laundry list. But the gist of it is, this is a series of phone calls, okay? And those times, by the way, I'm sure they're all ballpark. I don't know if they're precise. I'm not vouching for those exact times. That's what the log reads. Milley says, I'm reading to you from a log. I don't know if these are exactly right or not, but they're close. And so there's a bottom line is there's a series of these calls. And a lot of these calls, frankly, have been reported in the media. So there's the gist of them, Secretary Miller, National Guard, very intense calls, let's say. Same thing is true of the vice president's phone call. he's directing Miller to get as much down there as possible. And I'm on these calls. Kash Patel is listening to these calls. Secretary of the Army was on some of them, but not others. And there was, I think, Paul Nye and Ken Rapino would typically be on these calls, but that's the gist of all these calls, says Milley. They're all kind of the same in the sense they're very intense. It's a directive to Secretary Miller to get as much National Guard as we can. Miller didn't push back at all, said, Roger, exactly what we're doing. We're getting as much National Guard down there. Gave him a rundown of what we talked about. Who else can we get down to the Capitol as quickly as possible? Now, the exact words in each meeting, I can't really get specific. I mean, I was there, obviously, but I can't remember every single little quote. But those are the gist of the phone calls. They're quite intense. I don't want to make them sound like routine calls, okay, because they're not. They were intense. They were emphasizing urgency. And then the Capitol is declared cleared, looking back at the log. He says it's at 2000 hours, and that's about right if my memory serves. We'll call it 2000-ish. And about that time, the Capitol is cleared. It's cleared, and the members are all moving back into the chambers, right? The insurrection was over in like 4 hours. Wild. So for purposes of the DOD and National Guard and employment of the National Guard, a request from the mayor, I think, I'm not looking for the document right now. There were 340 went to traffic control points, unarmed, small 40-person force responded. I think 16 or 18 of these guys were Air Force mechanics, an ad hoc group. At the moment in the event, Secretary Miller goes through a decision-making cycle pretty quickly. They're just trying to mobilize the DC Guard. Then at 1740, they've got people arriving. And that's my version of everything. Okay, National Guard forces continue to build up over the next several days. And that's my version of the 6th and everything that happened on January 6th as best as I can remember, says General Milley. So then we get some questions. Let's see what happens. All right, thank you, General Milley. Now, I do want to circle back on some notes that I have. You said that there might have been a need to inform the White House if the crowd size was larger than 20,000, right? Yeah, right. Did that ever happen? Yeah, I think it not only happened once, I think it probably happened. My guess is that it happened multiple times. I think the OSD, SecDef's office, routinely was transmitting information to the White House. I don't have a log entry of that, but I think the answer is yes. And who at the White House was the SecDef transmitting this information to? This would be Trump's White House. Well, I don't have firsthand knowledge, but I would say this is an informed opinion opposed to actual fact. I would suggest probably the Situation Room. Possibly Advisor O'Brien, maybe Pat Cipollone, maybe Staff Meadows, Mark Meadows. I know there were a lot of phone calls back and forth between the SecDef's office and the White House to make sure they had a sense of what we were seeing. I don't know how many were there, but there were phone calls back and forth to Meadows. That was him personally. That I know happened. I believe, I don't know, because I didn't witness this, but I'm pretty sure Kash Patel also walked out of the Secretary of Defense's office over to his office, which is adjacent to that. So the short answer is yes. I believe that there was frequent communication between the White House and the SecDef. Okay, and you mentioned a couple times the lead federal agency. Can you tell us more about that? And going back prior to January 6th, when was this lead agency established or designated, etc.? Was this lead agency documented that was going to be handling January 6th? He says documented. I doubt it. It's possible, though, but I don't have a document. I don't recall seeing a document. And what would that document be, he says, about this lead agency, this lead federal agency? What is that? Anyone have any idea? What is that lead federal agency that was in charge of all this? Is it documented? No. Well, what document would I have anyways? That document would typically be something that comes out of the National Security Staff or the National Security Council, signed by Robert O'Brien. It would be a simple couple sentences, and it would say, the lead federal agency for this event is blank, and that's kind of the norm. But I don't recall seeing a written document about this agency. There might have been, though, so I don't want to say there wasn't a document. I just don't recall seeing it. So again, no paper trail. But I do know that it was designated. It was verbally designated as the DOJ. And that was done, I'm not positive it was Meadows or O'Brien who said it, but I know it came from the White House. It was one of these interagency calls preceding the 6th. So as you recall, there was a series of interagency phone calls saying, let's see, the president's meeting was the 3rd, and so there were meetings as early as maybe the 1st or the 31st, something like that in December. So there's a series of these meetings, and in those meetings, one of the topics is the designated lead federal agency. So that gets designated verbally in one of those meetings. I can't recall off the top of my head, but it was prior to the 6th. So I think I don't know, it could be the meeting on the 4th, could be the meeting on the 3rd. Milley continues, could be the meeting on the 2nd. I'm not sure which one. but it's one of those meetings where either Ambassador O'Brien or Meadows or one of them says, hey, the DOJ is the lead federal agency, which is the right answer, by the way. Yeah, our friends at the DOJ, even if it's Trump's DOJ. The DOJ should be the lead federal agency. It's a law enforcement issue. It's domestic in nature, and the federal level at the DOJ should be, and they are normally on things like this. And so given the fact that this was not a national security special event, designated event, it had to be worked out. So in an NSSE, those are designated as security event. Those are designated well ahead of time, and those are predictable. So things like the inauguration or the State of the Union, you know, those things. But in this case, this was not designated a national security special event. So the DOJ was in charge. Exactly which meeting, though, I'm not positive. Over. Milley continues. Question to Milley. In April 2021, hey, Miss General Milley, and what exactly was the DOJ as the lead federal agency leading on January 6th? Any idea what they were leading? What were they responsible for, aside from rigging everything? When you're designated, well, Milley says, well, when you're designated the lead federal agency, you know, you're supposed to, well, there's a lot of tasks out there. And there's an actual set of processes and procedures in the national security SOPs, standard operating procedures and processes, to kind of lay all this out. But in short, what it amounts to is the lead federal agency is required to plan, coordinate, synchronize, supervise execution of all things concerning especially security. Well, that is a nice, interesting little tidbit, isn't it? So Mark Milley is saying that the DOJ was responsible for January 6th, which, fine with me. It makes total sense. So they set it up to fail, and then they prosecute everybody. It's like you are creating your own customers. You prosecute, you create an environment, you ensnare and entrap a bunch of people, and then you prosecute them for it. Yeah, we're going to be responsible for securing the Capitol. They put up little bike lock racks around there that blow over in a small breeze, that when you bump into, they collapse over. Oh, it's secure. Everybody walks into the Capitol because they are tapping people on the shoulder to move cops out of the way. You just come waltzing in there for 10 minutes. Life's ruined. And they prosecute you for the next 4 years. And then some. Isn't it insane? What a lunatic kind of country. And Mark Milley, General Milley, is saying it. In this case, this was not designated as one of these events. So in the meeting leading up to the J6 event, the DOJ was designated as the lead federal agency. So they got it, we didn't get it. When you're designated a lead federal agency, you're supposed to, we'll see if they did it, do a bunch of stuff. Processes, procedures, national security SOPs. It says that you are required to plan, coordinate, synchronize, and supervise execution of all things, especially security. Oh, DOJ didn't do that. Now, concerning that specific event, and they have decision-making authority on where to allocate resources, arbitrate disputes between various agencies, and they're overall in charge of the federal response, they say. The federal preparation response, that's simply speaking, that's what it means when they say it's the lead federal agency. When it doesn't give them that, it doesn't give them a set of authorities that are in the sense of the word that we use the military command and control. So you don't get operational control. You don't get that true sense of the word command and control. So you get this term that's used in the federal government called the lead federal agency. So he's talking in bureaucratic bureau babble. No one knows what he's talking about. It's really a planning and coordinating. So, and at the cabinet level designation, so it applies to a cabinet. Now, typically speaking, for domestic things that involve law enforcement, typically speaking, it's the DOJ. And then below the cabinet level, below the departmental level, typically the lead federal agency designates one of their subordinate organizations to coordinate implementation. So the DOJ delegates it to someone else. Now, I still stand by my prior point on this. It's really Congress's responsibility in many ways, right? If they want, Congress can reject, in my opinion, its separation of powers, I would say applies literally based on the land and the jurisdiction of the building. If Congress says we don't want your federal agents in our building, okay, fine. You don't have to have them. And if they do, then fine, they can have them. Trump said secure the place, get it done, and they didn't do it. Now, in this case, so now he's saying it's kind of the DOJ, but in this case, for example, the FBI. The FBI, that's why the command center, the integrated command center is in the FBI building, because the DOJ, as the lead agency, is syncing all of this. And it's all happening in the FBI, which has already set Trump up multiple times. So you see they're all working together. So that's kind of how it works. The DOJ and the DOD will plug in liaison teams. We'll have a DOD joint staff liaison to whomever the lead federal agency is. And we did that as well. So that's kind of how it works. Over. Thank you, General. And I want to make sure I understand as to what part exactly are we talking about that they were lead agency for in response to at the Capitol or the events on the ellipse. So what kind of lead agency? He says all things. So the whole, okay. Yeah, in the vicinity of the National Capital Region, the DOJ was in charge of everything. In the National Capital Region, DOJ in charge of everything. So I guess supersedes Pelosi in Congress. Is that right? Capitol Hill Police. Now, okay, thank you. Now, while you were going to your timeline, you mentioned at 1412, an officer reported that nothing was escalating. It was just a protest. You know the name of that officer? Milley says, I don't. It's on a log. Let's see. 1412, it just says DJ 33 response. And so we can probably find that. Responds to an emails. The email supposedly January 6th at 1350. The email is by redacted, and the email states, nothing is escalating. It's a protest. Yeah. Can we find the email? Well, make sure you get that email, but it refers to a duty position and to not a person. It says DJ 33. Now that is an actual individual, but I don't know if that's actually that person or it's someone in their section. But anyway, we'll get you the email. I'll have Blank get you the email over. Okay, thank you. Now going to that key meeting at 1430. Yep. I want to make sure I understand. So when Secretary of Defense told McCarthy to alert the entire DC National Guard and to deploy them, what was the intent of the Secretary of Defense Miller when he told McCarthy that and Secretary McCarthy that? He says, well, I don't want to read minds here. I'll let you ask Mr. Miller himself. But my read of that would be, my understanding of his intent would be to the mass as many capabilities within the National Guard as you can to go around the Capitol, to mass them as fast as you can. Make sure that they're down there as a response force to what's unfolding and to do that quickly. And so I think the intent was to go ahead alert. Because remember, these guys are not on duty at this point. So you've got to alert them. You've got to marshal them, bring them into the armory. You've got to mobilize them, bring them on duty. And there's a technique there. You got to make sure that they're properly equipped. Make sure there's a plan so that they know what's expected of them, what their task and purpose is. He's going into general mode. Make sure they understand the rules of engagement. Make sure that they are, and he's like, getting an Oscar here, that they have proper, what we call set of troop leading procedures are complete. And then go ahead and commit them. Employ them down. It's in the filibustering almost. So I think that it's to deploy not just at the ellipse, but to deploy down around the Capitol. So I'm probably taking way longer than he would to explain his intent. Yeah, but I think that was his intent. Yeah, okay. So he's like, I'm just babbling here now, talking and implying. And did Mr. Miller direct Mr. McCarthy to get back with him once there was a plan in place before he actually gave the order? Well, I don't actually know. I don't remember. He might have. That would be normal if he did, I could imagine. Easily imagine him saying, okay, get all these things done. Report back to me when we have a final green light. Kind of a normal conversation between senior and subordinate officers. But I can't explicitly verify that any exchange took place for you under oath saying, yes, it did, because I don't have a clear and unambiguous question about that. Now, it seems normal to me that exchange would have happened, though. Okay, thank you. Other person? Yes, I got some questions. Thank you. This is questioning by this person now. General, I just want to clarify on the lead federal agency thing. He says, yeah. So is it my understanding that for each event, there has to be something that comes out of the White House designating the lead federal agency? Or is there like a statute or some type of policy that indicates who the lead federal agency will be for these events? Milley says, well, whenever two or more gather, someone has to be in charge. Unless you're the Secret Service, as we learned, they don't just have rules by committees. So you've got to lead federal agencies, all of whom are of equal rank. Cabinet officers, and anytime you're going to establish a command and control relationship with subordinate organizations, you're supposed to do that. So in military terms, here we go again, if you've got a combatant command or someone like that is going to be the lead, the secretary would be the guy who would designate who's in lead and who's in support, right? So that's a pretty normal procedure. So if you're going to have a lead federal agency, it takes the White House to designate it, in my view. Now, is it that written law? I don't know. I don't know if it is or not, but I mean, could the cabinet members work it out among themselves? Sure, they could, I guess, maybe, I don't know. But it seems to me that you've got two cabinet members, or if you got more than two, the White House would be the person, and the executive branch would be necessary to say, okay, you're the guy in charge. You're the lead federal agency, and everybody else is subordinate and such and such and so and so. That's the way I've seen it work in D.C. all the years I've been in D.C., and it doesn't, I'm not talking about necessarily the president saying, who's in charge, but the White House is saying, like the White House chief of staff or the national security advisor. They say who's in charge. Is it codified in the law, says Milley? I actually don't know if it's codified in the law. We can get you an answer from the lawyers and stuff like that, but the normal process I've seen work over the years, not just this past, since I've been chairman, but over the many years on the Joint Chief staff, etc., that's typically how I've seen it done. So it's just kind of a free-for-all. And previously, he says, oh, look, I'll give you an example. Let's take it out of the domestic unrest thing, okay? So if you have a hurricane, like we currently have right now, shout out and prayers to our friends in Florida and on the East Coast, or if you have a natural disaster, or if you have wildfires, you have these other things, the DOD typically responds to civilian authority in support of. DOD is in support of. So you could be in support of FEMA. You could be in support of DHS, a variety of agencies. That's how we do it. Okay, and in previous similar events where the possibility of civil disturbance was high, was there any difficulty in trying to identify the lead federal agency in charge? Or is this kind of like an anomaly for this event? You're trying to figure out who's in charge. He says, well, I'm not sure, Milley. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Are you talking about like stuff over the summer and everything? Like the summer of love? He says, yeah, correct. Yeah, so stuff that happened during the summer when Trump went into the bunker in June, maybe the 4th of July activities. Some of the events that occurred in November regarding the election, those types of things. Milley says, yeah. Was there a lead federal agency identified? And was it, I guess, as difficult as identifying one now during that time? No, he says, no. So in the summer, for all the civil unrest things, the federal agency, the lead federal agency for all of the civil unrest things that I've experienced in my career has always been the DOJ. For anything to do with civil unrest law enforcement, because it's well understood that law enforcement is the first response. So local law enforcement under the city, the mayor, etc., which is not federal. But if it gets to the federal level, then it's the federal law enforcement that is the lead agency. Now, not just the summer of love, but over the years for anything civil unrest related. If it is, like I said, wildfires or humanitarian assistance in a domestic scene, etc., a lot of times that's FEMA. Just depends. Depends on the nature of the event, says Milley. On national security special events, there's a very detailed set of rules. Not rules, but, SOPs and procedures. But those, not everything is a national security special event. Those are designated. So we have a list of one of them, for example, is the inauguration. That is one. It kicks in gear, the entire set of planning requirements, etc. There's a lead federal agency that's designated. And in that case of the inauguration, again, it's the DOJ it's the DHS rather for an inauguration and subordinates. The implementing agency for that national security special event for the inauguration is always the Secret Service. So they take the Secret Service runs the whole thing. So everybody's in support of DHS and Secret Service as the agencies. The DOD will take our tasking from them and they'll tell us we need 100 of this or 500 of that or 1,000 of this and where we need them and etc. And well, in the planning phase, we'll say, yep, we'll do that. We can't do that and so on. So that's what a lead federal agency does. Anytime you're dealing with civil unrest, though, the only one I've ever seen him do that as a lead federal agency is the Department of Justice. Over. So again, the DOJ is responsible for it. They are so problematic and incompetent, or let's say complicit, that January 6th happens because of a failure to plan. Trump ordered Milley. Trump was clear about wanting this to be implemented. They didn't do it. Now they're prosecuting all the J6ers, even though they were responsible for security. So it's almost like being a parent, your child gets injured because you were so negligent to secure a building. You were encouraging your child to play with fire. Your child gets burned because you were so reckless and negligent and ensnaring and entrapping, and then you punish your child after he burns himself. That's our DOJ. Welcome to America. All right. Thank you, sir. That's all I have. All right. Thank you. Someone else says, okay, thank you, General Milley. Now, what discussions were there about deploying active duty forces? Can you tell us about this? He says, what, on the 6th? Yeah, on the 6th. Well, there weren't many, actually. I'm trying to think if there were any. There were a lot of discussions in the summer, but on this particular one, there wasn't a lot of discussion about active duty forces. So you have, for example, the NCR, Fort Myer. Over the summer, we talked about 82nd. There's an old guard in Fort Myers. Ken Rapino is your guy on this. He goes around to all these different agencies, like the Metro Police, Capitol Police, DHS, FBI, Secret Service, and says, do you need assistance? And only the Metro Police and only the mayor asked for military assistance, presumably on the 6th. Nobody asked for National Guard. Nobody asked for active duty. Nobody directed it from the White House or OSD that said use active duty. And I don't recall over the summer that there were really some intense conversations about active duty in the summer. That was not a prominent discussion at any point in any of these things. They were mentioned a couple of times over the summer, but that's it. General Milley, is there anything else that you want to tell us about January 6th before we move back to before January 6th? He says, no, I think that covers it. The broad narrative out there in some circles is that the Pentagon acted slowly. He says, I don't think that's accurate. I think that's inaccurate. I think the Pentagon and the National Guard, Army, et cetera, I think given the circumstances, given the activities and the readiness, we acted very fast, going from a cold start. And for the people who say otherwise, that tells me they don't have a very good understanding of how you alert, marshal, deploy, coordinate, synchronize, mobilize, et cetera, military forces. Well, the point is you could have done it a long time ago. Trump sent the letter, I think, on January 4th. So if you have them there early, you don't have to do all of that in the blink of an eye. And you do that cold start. Nobody told you to do that. Actually, you got the order, Milley, from Trump to prepare. In the grand scheme of things, that's pretty quick in terms of response. So I think that narrative is factually incorrect. I think the Pentagon reacted with extraordinary speed and due diligence. And so the other thing I would say is I don't have firsthand knowledge of anyone that intentionally blocked, prevented, or tried to slow down their response. There's a lot of discussion prior to the 6th about the appropriate level and the amount of the National Guard. And that's what all of those requests were. Ken Rapino going up, that's a lead to the prep stuff. On the 6th itself, I don't remember anyone trying to block or slow anything down. I mean, there's some people out there who suggest that, but I didn't witness any of that. And I think I have a pretty good handle on it. Thank you, General. Now, tell us, going kind of circling to what you said about the word optics or visuals about the military. Can you tell us about the optics? He says, yeah, so I'm going from media reports here. So in the media, there's supposedly a phone call that occurs. I think it's between Capitol Police, MPD, et cetera, and the Army. Elements of the Army, they cite General Flynn, General Piat, and others in that phone call. I have no firsthand knowledge of that, says Milley. I wasn't on the phone call. Everything I know is after the fact, and most of it is from the media on that call. And on the 6th, when they say, from 1430 on sort of the thing, I don't remember anybody saying do this or don't do that because of optics. Did somebody say that? Well, that's a maybe. I don't know. But I don't recall that being any kind of focal point about optics on the 6th. What I recall unambiguously is a sense of urgency to get as many people down there as quickly as possible. I don't remember, did anybody talk about optics or any of that? Did people say it? Maybe. I don't know. Firsthand knowledge? I don't recall seeing it. I don't recall hearing all that on the day of the 6th. Prior to the 6th, I think there was probably, I don't have firsthand knowledge of like meetings where people said, oh, that's bad optics or anything like that. Milley says, but I do think that people prior to the 6th may have been a consideration in some people's minds about military forces down at the Capitol. So I think, and again, I didn't personally interact with Mayor Bowser. I didn't talk personally to the heads of the Capitol Police or the Sergeant at Arms or any of the folks down there prior to that. I didn't personally do that. Ken Rapino did a lot of that, but I didn't. The Secretary of the Army did a lot of that. But I suspect that one of the reasons they only wanted 340 guys in soft caps and orange vests with no weapon or riot gear. I suspect going through their minds, and again, I don't have firsthand knowledge, but I suspect that that was probably a consideration about militarizing the Capitol. And people were reluctant to do that because of the reaction over the summer, which was widely viewed as militarizing the Capitol. So I suspect that people did take that into consideration. So optics is why they didn't secure the building. Was I in the meetings that people said, no, we're not going to do that because of optics? I don't recall the word optics being used. He's saying the word optics a lot here. I don't remember people kind of jumping over hoops on that particular thing in the lead up to the execution of this. I don't remember anyone talking about it on the 6th. Over. And did you have any conversations with members of Congress? Yes. Before January 6th, where this subject came up, like optics or visuals, or, I did have conversations with members of Congress all the time. I won't say every day, but pretty much many times a week, I talk to Congress about all kinds of things. So leading up to the 6th, short answer is yes in terms of conversations, but not just about the 6th. Everything from budgets to the world, Russia, Iran, North Korea, all kinds of stuff. I don't think I or any member of Congress to me was saying to do something based on optics. I don't recall anything like that. I don't think anyone made a big deal of that with me. And then on the event day, I personally was called. Let's see, who was I called by, says Milley. Let's see. I was called by Congresswoman Slotkin. And these are in addition to those phone calls that were kind of conference calls. Slotkin, and I think I'm doing this a little bit from memory here, so I want to say maybe Senator Sullivan might have called, and a couple of others, but the word optics wasn't coming out of their mouths, okay? The words coming out of their mouths was, we need help, it's bad, get all the forces down here, that kind of thing, sense of urgency. There wasn't any discussion of optics, but I do think people probably consider it in their response leading up to it. Over. All right, thank you. I want to go back to during our last interview. When you were talking about the lead federal agency and all these interagency meetings, you mentioned that you spoke about a variety of these acting secretaries. What did you mean by that? Well, the variety of, blank, I'm not sure what the question is here. So when we were talking about these interagency meetings, you're telling us that there were acting Attorney General Rosen. So you know what impact acting, right? The impact of acting versus confirmed, that? Yes, I guess. So, well, an acting secretary, although they had the same authorities as a confirmed secretary, but within the system of government, my personal observation and experience, like technically they're the same, but an acting secretary isn't quite the same as a Senate confirmed secretary in terms of the weight that they carry within interagency decision making. So that became an issue, right? Well, you're not a real secretary. So let me, by way of comparison, and this isn't meant to be disparaging toward anyone, but Attorney General Barr was clearly and unambiguously the Attorney General. And he was very assertive, like everyone knew he was Barr. So then Rosen came in after Barr resigned, and Rosen, he was acting Attorney General for like 30 days when all this happened, so no one really listened to him. Maybe it's more than that. But when January 6th happened, and I think that's something to be said between the difference between a Senate confirmed and an acting when it comes to their voice, no one listened to him. And I think there's a difference, even though their legal authorities might be the same. So I just think, and again, I don't want this to sound wrong, I'm not taking shots at acting secretaries or like acting judges like Mercan at all. They all try to do the right thing, but I guess, a Senate confirmed cabinet member, it's part of our government. And if you're not Senate confirmed, they just, I guess, don't follow his orders. That carries forward into the person's ability to execute their duties. And so I think Attorney General Rosen or Acting Director Wolf or Acting SecDef Miller or any number of these acting secretaries, I think that having the confirmed secretaries is a better solution to get a better outcome, for lack of a better words. Okay. So he's saying that they didn't listen to them, which is, I think, in direct violation of the chain of command, right? People aren't listening to them. Now, thank you, General Milley. I know you have to go, so. Now, one last piece, says Milley, as they wrap this up. I'm very sensitive to the, Milley says, I'm a soldier. I'm a military officer, and I shouldn't be. And I don't mean to. I shouldn't be commenting on civilian appointees confirmed or acting. It's not my job. I'm a soldier, and I submit to civilian control of the military, and the acting secretaries have as much authorities over the military as non-acting secretaries, sort of thing. So I don't mean it to be disparaging, but I just want to make sure it's clear as you guys write this stuff up over. He's like, oh, crap, I'm in trouble. So he's like, I just said that nobody listened to them. Nobody was listening to Trump's people. All right, thank you. Thank you, General Milley. Is there anything you thought we would ask that we did not? It's a fun question. Now, no, I think like you asked that in a podcast interview. Okay, that's what you ask in a podcast interview. You don't ask this in an investigation into criminal wrongdoing. No, I think I'm sure there's stuff out there you might have to follow up questions on. I'm happy to make myself available, but right off the bat, no. I think we're probably okay. And I owe you these documents. I'm trying to think if there's anything out there. We owe you documents. We'll follow up and make ourselves available anytime you want. Oh, thank you, says the questioner. And we probably might have a couple of follow-up. We can either, I will talk with blank and we'll see what's the best way of doing those. Yeah, we could do that. I mean, that's easy. Okay, do you have any comments or concerns? Milley says, I'm not going anywhere. You guys know where I'm at. Yes, we do. Okay, do you have any comments or concerns about the way we conducted this interview? No, none whatsoever. Okay, if there's anything else, Mr. Milley, that you think went wrong, then you can contact us. If anyone talks about you, if you feel threatened, let us know. Time is now 3:19, end of page. So you see, there were some significant redactions in here in these earlier pages. And the question is, what were they hiding? It certainly feels like it's the exculpatory evidence that should have been revealed to us a long time ago, where Milley says the following: Trump gave him a direct order. Make sure that you have sufficient National Guard, soldiers to make sure it's a safe event. Even the Secretary of Defense, acting Christopher Miller, heard the same thing. Hey, we've got a plan and we've got it covered, is what the response was from SecDef Miller. But as we know, January 6th happened. They didn't secure the premises. And now Trump is being vindicated, showing us the truth. He wanted the Capitol secured. He many times made many offers, including an offer to Mayor Muriel Bowser. She rejected him because they wanted it to happen so they could ensnare him and every single Trump supporter in their political attack that has been never ending since that day. Thank you for subscribing, my friends. We're going to continue to cover this one. Now, let's continue on, because Trump also had a big day in court today, and this one was a lot of fun. And so as we change gears, my friends, thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. Thanks for liking this video. Thanks for sharing it with a friend or family member, because we got another good segment right here. We're back in New York. Leticia James, Letitia, had a rough day in court today. She's fighting to keep her $450+ million judgment on the books after it came out from the judge Engoron, Arthur Engoron, aka the Nip, Areola Engoron, and his law clerk. They enabled the Attorney General of New York to go after a private business and judge their contracts for loans with banks. If you remember this case, we had Alina Abba in court. Tish James was taking her shoes off, stinking up the whole building. Arthur Engoron was moving the cameras around the courtroom so nobody could see his game of footsie with his law clerk, passing notes to each other endlessly. Well, what they did is they civilly, essentially criminalized Trump to the tune of $450 million by saying that his loan deals were bad, even though the banks never claimed they were victimized, never complained about it at all. Every single one of his statement of disclosures, financial disclosures, says, do your own vetting on my assessment of my net worth. And they did. And it wasn't until Tish came in that this was ever even a thing in New York. So I want to show you what happens here. We are in the appellate division in New York State. We have these 5 judges here on the panel. We're going to pay close attention to this gentleman. as this woman here comes up to the podium, you'll see this is the government's attorney from Tish's office. And the way this works in appellate proceedings is often the person presenting will give a bit of an opening statement. We've heard this here when we've covered Supreme Court oral arguments. They come in, may it please the court. My name is Robert Gouveia. Your honors, we're here today to discuss this issue about how corrupt the FBI and the DOJ are and why they should be disbanded because of their constitutional violations. And today our main argument is the following. And you give a little bit of a speech and you say thank you, right? Maybe it's a minute, 2 minutes, sometimes it's longer. But the judges will usually cut you off, right? You'll hear Clarence Thomas come in. Mr. Gouveia, is it true? Yes, Your Honor, it is. You're true. A boy can dream, right? But it is common to be interrupted in your oral arguments. But watch this one, okay? This one came fast. This woman didn't even finish her name. And this judge seems like he had a little bit of extra pep in his question. Let's listen.
You have 10 minutes on this.
Well, I don't know if it's easier, Your Honor. Since we're the appellees, I'm happy to just take the full 15 minutes as the appellee, and that
Okay.
I think that maybe simplifies things.
Yes.
May it please the court, Judith Vale for the New York Attorney General's office. All of the defendants repeatedly
Ms.
violated.
Vale, can you identify any previous case in which the Attorney General sued under Executive Law 6312 to upset a private business transaction that was between equally sophisticated partners, where the supposed victim had the ability and legal obligation to discover the allegedly misrepresented matters by conducting its own due diligence?
Wow.
Where the supposed wrongdoer advised the supposed victim through written disclaimers to conduct its own due diligence and to draw its own conclusions, where the alleged misrepresentation almost entirely concerned inherently subjective valuations of properties and businesses.
Yes,
And where the victim never complained about any fraud in the transactional losses from it. Because I've gone through the cases which you've cited, and all of them always involved the consumer protection aspect. It involved protection of the market.
several responses.
And I want to add to his question.
So that was just a devastating takedown. If you heard all of that, that judge had that question in his mind and he just eviscerated her. He said, hello, these are co-equal parties, okay? This is not like some sophisticated person, unsophisticated. These are like national, international banks that Trump was dealing with. $100 million entity with $1 billion entity. Trump had disclosures. They were on even playing fields. There was no undue pressure. No one even complained about it. They did multiple business deals. Have you ever done this before at all, ever in New York? And don't tell me about your cases, by the way. I read your briefing. It's not what happened in those cases. And this other judge is jumping in too. She's like, yeah, and I want to add something to that. It's brutal, okay? She didn't even get the last syllable of her name out.
And little to no impact on the public marketplace.
No one even got
Well,
hurt.
maybe I'll take that first, Your Honor, and work backwards. There was absolutely a public impact and a
What?
public interest here. There are at least 4 different public harms from the kind of misconduct here. First of all, when deceptively hidden risks are injected into the market, that does hurt the counterparties, and there was harm to the counterparties here.
There was no deceptive risks. The banks did their due diligence, and Trump did his due diligence, and they came to terms. They made
But
money.
it also harms other market participants and the market as a whole because they are not understanding the risks, they are not pricing them in properly, and they are not prepared for what might happen if the true risks come to pass. Also, as the legislature made clear in passing 6312, it was concerned with harms to the honest business people who don't do the misconduct and therefore don't get the kind of benefit that they got here.
I suppose you're referring to the fact that Trump received a lower interest rate than he might otherwise have received. But haven't you yourself conceded that the assets were sufficient to get the lower interest rate of the private wealth management direction?
Absolutely not, Your Honor. That is not conceded one bit, and the evidence is to the contrary. If you look at what the Deutsche Bank witnesses testified to, Haig said that the financial strength of the guarantor affects the pricing in terms of the loan, that's in the record at 28167 to 68, and it affects whether the private wealth management group would be allowed to do this deal at all. That's at 28150 of the record. And you have to remember something. As the net worth as the statements were coming in, the Deutsche Bank was doing a stress test. So if without the fraud, the net worth and liquidity would have started much lower, and then you do the stress test and it takes it down much lower. It does not look like such a strong financial guarantee anymore. It does not look like an ironclad guarantee anymore. And it was absolutely a fair inference that Deutsche Bank would not have given these loans without the financial strength being inflated. That was also evident from Haig and McCarty testifying about the incredible
Doesn't Mr.
collateral.
Doesn't Mr. Hay testify that there were 14 factors and this was the least important factor?
Well, certainly there are multiple factors that go into the risk assessment, but both for materiality and for disgorgement, the issue is not whether there's only one factor. There's often a lot of factors that are being considered.
So when the bank is doing their assessment on how to assess risk and their interest rates, the things that Trump was talking about didn't even matter to them. And well, she's like, well, but it could have or should have.
For materiality, it's whether it's important to the overall total mix of information. And this was absolutely critical to the overall mix of information, not only because they were looking specifically at what the net worth was in order to decide the terms of the loan, in order to figure out whether they would take on this risk, but also the financial statements were coming in each year, and they were important, critical to the loans each year, because Deutsche Bank was reassessing the risk every single year, and it was using—
I'm sorry, but what's being described sounds an awful lot like a potential commercial dispute between private actors.
Well, to go back to the first question about whether—
Yeah, so in other words, if Deutsche Bank was upset about this, if Deutsche Bank feels like they got screwed, oh, Trump lied to us. His building was 1,000 feet smaller than he said it was. Like that's what they're arguing about. No, your property was a little bit smaller, or 2% smaller, or something like that. And so you fibbed your numbers. So if Deutsche Bank feels like they got screwed, they come back and say, hey, Trump took advantage of us, broke the contract, made a bunch of money, sue him. Because he signs that his disclosures are true and accurate. Right here are my statements. Sue him for a breach of contract in commercial litigation. Why didn't you do that? Why didn't you leave it up to the parties to rectify this? Why did Tish James have to campaign on doing this in order to get elected and then do it? Is that justice?
There's other examples of this. There are other examples of this. In the First American case, the Attorney General brought a 6312 case where the transaction at issue was between a very big bank,
this before.
Wells Fargo,
we have precedent,
and a professional appraisal firm.
But wasn't the concern there that the public would ultimately be negatively impacted and affected by what those corporate actors were doing?
And that concern is here as well, because when you have hidden risks getting injected into the market, that hurts the market and honest participants in the market. And the legislature also decided, contrary to what defendants think, that making sure that business in New York stays honest is the way to attract and keep business
to that
in New York.
point, the Executive Law 6312, I just want to read a section of it. Well, not exactly, but was enacted to promote and protect honesty and integrity. It's the same question I asked the other side. In commercial marketplaces in New York, by stopping fraudulent and illegal businesses. To accomplish this purpose, the statute authorizes the Attorney General to bring civil enforcement proceedings on behalf of the people whenever any person shall engage in repeated fraudulent or illegal acts or otherwise demonstrate persistent fraud or illegality in the carrying on, conducting, or transacting of business. I don't read harm or threat of harm in that, but the other side is saying that that is to be read into the statute. Are there any cases where the language harm or threat to harm limits the scope of the Attorney General?
No, Your Honor, not as to liability, and not in cases like this where what the Attorney General is seeking is injunctive relief and disgorgement. Greenberg for the New York Court of—
So her power is broad, very, very broad. Trump's team is saying, no, the statute, it doesn't give her any power to go investigate any entity. there has to be a harm from that entity in order to give her jurisdiction to initiate a claim. Here, the judge is saying, I don't see harm in the statute, so it's not even in there. So can she do whatever she wants, basically?
Appeals and Ernst & Young from this court make clear that reliance by a counterparty and actual harm to a counterparty are not required for liability for any of the claims here. And remember to think about the illegality claims as well, because it's not just fraud.
That's
Could you just
very
let her finish the question? Just
So for the
the answer,
illegality
please.
claims, you look to the underlying penal law provisions. And for something like issuing false financial statements, there's no requirement for reliance. There's intent and there's materiality, which was proved at trial. But if someone issues a false financial statement to their counterparty, the counterparty gets it and is not fooled, picks up the phone and calls the enforcement authorities, the crime has still been committed, even though the counterparty didn't rely on it at all.
So you're pointing to Ernst & Young, you're pointing to First American. Ernst & Young, you're dealing with the collapse of Lehman Brothers. First American, you're dealing with an action brought against an appraiser who overvalued properties at the behest of a lender perpetrating a scheme to induce unsophisticated consumers into taking out home loans that they could not afford.
Okay, so just compare and contrast those two cases. She's saying, okay, you're saying that this action against Trump is valid because it's very like these other cases. What other cases? The Lehman Brothers, which collapsed due to massive fraud. Or this other guy who was a real estate evaluator who is very sophisticated, defrauding people. Like it's part of the business. Trump was building real estate properties and renovating properties as part of a business deal.
Hardly seems that justifies bringing an action to protect Deutsche Bank against President Trump, which is what you have here. I mean, you've got two really sophisticated parties in which no one lost any money, and that was the point of my initial question.
Shout out to
Every
this
case
judge.
that you cite involved where there was damage to consumers, damage to the marketplace, you've got a scheme to get unsophisticated consumers to take out home loans, you got a collapse of Lehman Brothers. You don't have anything like that here.
Well, first of all, Your Honor, the statute doesn't require that whatsoever for liability. And the statute is written broadly because the legislature wants the Attorney General to go in and stop fraud and illegality.
Counsel, an example of what you're talking about, I think, is People versus Allen, isn't it? There it was just a dispute among partners.
Yes, and
It
the
didn't affect the
investors-
public, I mean,
Sorry, go ahead.
at all. But I think you hear underneath all these questions, the question of mission creep. Has 6312 morphed into something that was
Yes.
not meant to do? And that's something you must address because there has to be some limitation on what the Attorney General can do
No,
in
it's Tish.
interfering in these private transactions, as Justice Friedman said, that where people don't claim harm. So what is the limiting principle?
Well, I'll say two things,
Don't
Your
be
Honor.
Trump. That's
well, first
it.
of all, the limiting principle
Don't be
are
Trump.
what's in the law. So the illegality claims require intent. They require materiality.
Let's talk
most
about the
of them.
standalone, but talk about the standalone.
Just for the 6312 fraud. Well, this court has defined that rather broadly, but there are still limits. It is not falsity in the wind, first of all. It is not falsity that you whisper to someone on the couch. It has to be related and relevant to the business at hand, and it does have to have a capacity or tendency to deceive. It has to have a capacity or tendency to deceive. And I will stress, Your Honor, that this does have harm to the public and to the markets. And I think what Your Honor is saying is that in some of the other cases, the ripple effects happen to happen. It went so far that the ripple effects from fraud went on to hurt the market. But what the legislature wanted was 6312, just like for the Martin Act. And the Court of Appeals talks about this in assured guarantee.
To be prophylactic, is that what you're about to say, counsel?
Yes, look at the assured guarantee case from the Court of Appeals. It talks about how a big point of these statutes, not the only point, but a big point is for the Attorney General to go in quickly to stop the fraud and illegality before it gets to the point that counterparties are harmed or it
Tish
has
has
those kinds of
total
ripple effects in
control.
the market. I do want to, though, push back on the idea that Deutsche Bank never complained and wasn't harmed at all. Deutsche Bank did complain. When they first found out about the alleged misstatements and omissions, they raised serious concerns with defendants, said that misstatements in the financial statements would be an event of default. They asked for more information, and when they didn't get more information, they exited the entire relationship with the Trumps. That shows that they cared about the financial statements being truthful and accurate.
What
and
year
that
was
they
that
were
in? What year was that in?
It was right when they first heard about the allegations, so I believe it was 2020, Your Honor.
Oh, after
Although
you
I'd have to check
filed?
the precise year on that.
After you
and
filed.
Mazars as well, when Mazars found out.
Oh, I was going to say, that never came in at trial, okay? And we didn't hear that about the relationship evaporating. So they start prosecuting Trump for fraud, saying he defrauded Deutsche Bank. And then they're like, well, I guess we can't do any business with you, obviously. It's not good for our bank to be seen as doing business with somebody who's being prosecuted by the government. These people are the worst. It's like, yeah, you illegally prosecute somebody. You say, wow, that he's a rapist and he's got a bunch of PDF files on his hard drive and all the things. The whole society then shreds that guy. Turns out he didn't do anything wrong at all. And you're like, well, society hates him. So see, we're right. You're like, you didn't do it. You corrupt prosecutor losers. This is how the government works. It's sick. Let's continue.
About the alleged misstatements and omissions. They also sent a letter saying these financial statements should not
And the judge called her out on that. What year was that? Okay.
be relied upon anymore. So it is not true that the counterparties didn't care or never complained, even though that's not required for 6312.
Also, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm moving off topic, so if you have a question on this, go ahead.
Maybe a better topic than mine. Back to Justice Moulton's point about line drawing, because I do think that is very important in this case. You know the history of this statute. It's passed under then AG Javits, and then was really amplified by AG Lefkowitz over the years. And when I went back and read the bill jackets, the common thread was always we need greater power. The AG needs greater powers as the people's lawyer to protect consumers, civil rights, and the environment. And so again, with that sort of historical backdrop to this law, how do we draw a line or at least put up some guardrails to know when the AG is operating well within her admittedly broad sphere of 6312, and when she is going into an area that wasn't intended for her jurisdiction?
Sure, Your Honor. Well, I will say, although there was certainly concern about consumers, especially at the outset of 6312, in some of the legislative history, there were multiple bills being passed, and some of them were more specifically consumer protection statutes, which I think explains some of the focus. And the legislature wrote this statute. It doesn't say consumers in it. It wasn't focused. I mean, of course, we want to protect consumers. I'm not.
And
not
it
saying
does
otherwise,
start off. It does start off with the words to protect honesty and integrity in the commercial marketplace.
So whatever she wants.
Yes, Your Honor. And
Very
it also
broad.
is focused. It says
That
quite
judge is
broadly,
not gonna be on our side.
whenever any person engages in fraud or illegality, whether that is meant to include businesses large or small,
Dictator
because
Tish
this
runs
kind
New
of
York.
deceptive risk does cause problems for the honest business people who don't do it this way and don't get the ill-gotten gains. And it does inject risks into the market. I mean, Your Honor, there was probably a time when most of us didn't know what a Repo 105 was, which is what brought down Lehman, or what a RMBS was. And maybe, in an ideal world, the Attorney General or somebody else would have gone in and stopped that fraud and illegality when it was still just among the sophisticated counterparties and before it had the enormous harms and ripple effects that it ended up having.
So let me just ask you, you mentioned about the ripple effect, going on. If the threat of harm or whatever the ripple effect is so remote, does the conduct fall still? I mean, how remote does it have to be? It's the same question.
Can you do whatever you
with regard to
want,
this line
anywhere,
drawing,
for whatever
in order for
purpose?
the AG to follow through?
I mean, I think the remoteness
Or
problem
until
is,
it's outside of the scope of the statute as intended?
I mean, I think, at least for 6312 fraud standing alone,
It's discretionary.
I think the limit does come in through the capacity or tendency to deceive requirement. I don't think that the legislature wanted to have this kind of like evaluation about the precise harm out of a specific
Yeah, it's
transaction. I mean,
discretionary.
that's why harm is an issue that might be for restitution, but that's
It's
not
for
an
Tish
issue
to
here.
decide.
But there is a limit, and it comes from the tendency or capacity to deceive standard that this court has put on.
Capacity
that does
to deceive?
incorporate a materiality-like standard. I think when we say materiality is not required, we're talking about the reasonable investor. That materiality is not required. It's just which objective person
There
you're
is no
looking to.
limit.
There's still an objective
She has to
standard.
stick to that.
So
That's her
there
argument.
That's a good point. And so which objective person are we looking to here, given that it is the nature of the transaction
Tish!
that it is. I don't want to
Tish! Whatever Tish wants.
I mean, it doesn't,
Tish.
this court has said that the standard for 6312 fraud standing alone is the objectively reasonable, ordinary, and even unthinking person.
That's
But in this
Tish.
case, the court could use the higher standard and it would be fine. Because
No.
these,
I notice you say the ordinary standard on page 55 of your brief. You say these deceptive strategies had a capacity or tendency to deceive because they would have been relevant to and likely to mislead an ordinary person involved in the business dealings, and you cite to General Electric.
Yeah, but they weren't ordinary business
Isn't
people.
the test here whether they were likely to mislead Deutsche Bank or Ladder Capital or the City of New York awarding a golf license, or Zurich on a surety bond program, or Everest National Insurance Company on a directors and officers policies? The defendant's statements were not meant for ordinary people. They were directed at some of the most sophisticated individuals and
international
entities in
banks.
business.
well, if the court wants to use the standard of an objectively reasonable counterparty, sophisticated counterparty, fine. They had a capacity or tendency to deceive the sophisticated party as well, because these misstatements and omissions were about objective facts that were extremely important and that any reasonable counterparty would want to know. Any sophisticated, reasonable counterparty would want to know that the defendants were valuing an apartment based on 20,000 square feet more than it really was, based on pretending that rent regulations on certain apartments didn't exist, based on pretending that the Mar-a-Lago restrictions didn't exist. Your Honor asked about that. The trial court was
$18
very
million
clear that it was not
Mar-a-Lago,
coming
yeah.
up with a magical valuation for itself. The problem with the Mar-a-Lago valuation is similar to what happened with the rent-regulated apartments. The restrictions in the deed are
18
there.
million
They
is
are an
what they
objective
valued that
fact.
as,
They are
according to
very
Engeron.
restrictive. And even defendant's own expert at summary judgment, this is at 16502 of the record,
How much time does she
agreed
have
that
left?
the restrictions would decrease the value of Mar-a-Lago, but defendants valued it as if those restrictions didn't exist at all.
Counsel, I want to ask my question because your red light is on.
Absolutely, Your Honor.
Your red light's on.
Yes.
Oh, gosh.
For the disgorgement calculations, wouldn't it have been more appropriate to calculate them by calculating the difference in valuation of the property versus the valuation provided to the banks to get the loans?
No, Your Honor, the disgorgement calculation, what we needed was the reasonable approximation. What is the reasonable approximation of what defendants' fraud gained them? And defendants' theory is that the guarantee and the financial statements each year were worth nothing. But the point of the guarantee and the financial statements each year was to get the extremely favorable interest rates. And we were not speculating about the difference in interest rates. We had the counteroffer that Deutsche Bank, their own lenders, provided them for a loan without the guarantee and the financial statements. If I could touch very briefly on the statute of limitations, Your
I
Honor.
think we have it. Did you have another question?
I have a question that's
And I'll
similar
give
to
you
Judge
time for a
Rosado's,
second.
actually, which is the immense penalty in this case is troubling.
Yeah,
So how do you tether
that's true.
the amount that was assessed by Supreme Court to the harm that was caused here, where the
No.
parties left these transactions happy about how things went down?
Well, disgorgement, Your Honor, looks at taking the gain away from the wrongdoer. And although this is a large number, it's a large number for a couple reasons. One, because there was a lot of fraud. This went on, and illegality. It went on for 7 years during the statute of limitations period. Another reason is because the guarantee and the financial statements each year worked to get enormously favorable interest rate savings to the defendants. It was a difference of approximately 4 to 8 percentage points, obviously varied by year. That is an enormous benefit that they got from the misconduct, and it is not an excuse to say, well, our fraud was really successful, so we should get some of the money.
Was there double counting in the damages assessed for the old post office and the Ferry Point?
No, there was
deals?
not. There was not double counting, Your Honor. Two points on this. First of all, the interest rate savings and the sale profits are separate pots of money. The defendants got the interest rate savings off the top. There's no suggestion that they invested that savings into
looks like Trump's
into the
lawyer's
OPO.
laughing right here,
They were
D. John
using
Sauer.
the loan, and so they got the interest rate off the top. That
Just
was
a
the
little bit
savings
more
that they
her,
got.
and then Trump's defense will
Each
be
year,
it.
I mean, each year within the statute of limitations, they were getting a savings by doing the fraud over and over again.
So every
and the
year,
illegality.
compound the-
And then the sale profits are separate. And the sale profits, it's not the proceeds. The proceeds of the loan of the sale were around $370 million.
It feels
The trial
like it's like
court
4-1
took
to me.
out the repayment of the Deutsche Bank loan, and I think defendants themselves had taken out already the taxes. And Mr. Trump testified that the number for him, around 126 million in profits, was his profit. That was his profit or more. I'd happy to talk about the statute of limitations quickly, although I see that my red light is on. So
Been on
I'll
for a
give you
while.
more time for.
Sure, Your Honor. On the
give
statute of
you-
limitations.
How much? I'll give you 3 minutes.
Thank you, Your Honor. On the statute of limitations, each use of a misleading statement in business and each issuance of a false financial statement is a violation of the statute. And it is helpful to look at the illegality claims. Every time someone issues a false financial statement, that is a crime, and it is no excuse under the statute of limitations to say, oh, although I issued a false statement in 2017, I should somehow, for statute of limitations purposes, be free and clear because I also issued a different false financial statement in 2011.
Is there any tension between your position and our prior decision that said we have to look to the accrual as of the date the transactions were completed?
No, Your Honor. I think the best reading of that language is that the transactions completed. The transaction is referring to the conduct that the statute is referring to, which is the fraud or illegality. So each time you issue a false financial statement, for example, that is a transaction.
I don't think it's referring to the loan.
No, Your Honor. If the court had wanted to refer to the loan completing or the loan initiating, it would have said that. And Ivanka was much differently situated. The problem, for what this court said about Ivanka Trump was that she was not sufficiently involved within the statute of limitations for her with the certification, preparation, review, or use of the statements. That was why she was released from the case. Whereas the defendants that remain, each personally were involved in the preparation, issuance, and use of the statements in business. And it would really be a distortion of 6312 and this court's precedent in cases like Allen. A similar thing was happening in Allen, where the original relationship between the counterparties started before the statute of limitations, but then new fraudulent or illegal acts were happening within the statute of limitations. And what the trial court said there, and what this court affirmed, was the new conduct that happened within the statute of limitations is timely and actionable, but the things that happen outside of the statute of limitations are not. And I do want to emphasize that neither the trial court nor the Attorney General sought liability based on the fraud or illegality that happened in 2011 or 2012. That is not true. After this court's decision, the Attorney General was not pursuing its claims for the interest rate differential for 2011 or 2012 or 2013. We were pursuing that before, and because of this court's decision, we stopped. And the trial court appropriately separated it and said the claims that are based on fraud or illegality that happened before 2014 are out. And the ones that happened in the statute of limitations period are in.
Yeah, but he still allowed them to talk about those prior claims. So those claims couldn't be brought as formal, as a formal part of the charging document, so to speak, in this case. The official complaint it wasn't charged like as a crime in a criminal indictment, but they could still talk about it. And Engeron said that was because it was showing a pattern, right? Propensity, and that it was relevant towards the totality. It was one indicator of a much broader pattern of fraud from Trump. So they allowed it in. And they know that in the Court of Appeals.
Do you want to respond to?
Well, I can touch very briefly on the sanctions, Your Honor. I think for the sanctions, I'll say two things. And one is it was not just one frivolous argument. It was multiple frivolous arguments happening, including both at summary judgment, raising the argument that disgorgement is not allowed under 6312 as a categorical matter. That is foreclosed by controlling New York Court of Appeals precedent in Greenberg. And counsel misquoted Greenberg in making that argument to make it seem as if Greenberg had not said what it said. And it was that combined with raising purely legal arguments about standing capacity to sue, raising those arguments again for the third time after the trial court had warned them and said at the motion to dismiss stage, these arguments are frivolous, but I'm not going to sanction you now. I'm warning you. And I understand the need and the feeling to preserve, the need to preserve arguments for appeal. As an appellate attorney, I understand that. But what counsel did here was not write a sentence or two and say, for the purposes of preservation, we are adding this to our brief. They wrote the whole argument again, relying on all the same cases and all the same legal arguments without explaining what as a factual matter was different, and that was unnecessary and frivolous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Whew! All right, we did it.
Mr. Sauer?
D. John Sauer for President Trump, joined by Emil Bove on his
Thank you,
left.
Honor. Just pivoting to that last point. Last year, the Attorney General's office was here on the continuing wrong doctrine, making the exact same arguments. This court rejected them and Trump won. And we're hearing the same arguments again, citing some of the same case law that was sanctionable for our attorneys in the lower court. But here we are. Now, I want to point the court to two citations in the summary judgment record that I think frame a lot of the questions that my colleague was asked. At 13865, there's unrebutted testimony in the summary judgment record that at least creates a disputed material fact that President Trump would have got the same deal from Deutsche Bank if his net worth had been as low as $1 billion. In their calculation, it was never below $3 billion. So it's triple the threshold. And the clear testimony is the interest rates would have been the same. He would have been they held up a chart that would have been on the same pricing chart. So this notion that there were these 8 basis points at issue is just not supportable.
Yeah, so the idea is it's like you have different categories. If you are, if you need, 0 to 100 million, you're down here. 100 to 500 million, you're in here. 500 to $1 billion, you're here. 1 to 3 billion, you're in here. 3 to 7 billion, 10 billion plus. Trump was in this category. He was going to get the same no matter what. They're trying to say, and look, she's got a little bit of a pouty face right there, doesn't she? She's trying to make the point that Trump made some, massive windfall here when it's just not true.
Secondly, at 20,042.
And she's not in a position as the Attorney General of the state to make that distinction.
To 44 of the record and in other places. The Deutsche Bank witness said, we independently assess all these valuations. We are not relying on the numbers that the client is giving us. We do our own independent assessment. That is our due diligence.
Not even
That's
what Trump gave them.
understanding of the relevant
Don't even care.
marketplaces.
I'm sorry, sir, but
Nordbank.
so we're talking now about cause of action number one, the fraud under 6312.
Yes, and the causation argument as to disgorgement. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we know point taken, as to the liability on cause of action number one, we know fraud under 6312 has a much broader meaning than common law fraud. And so there it's, as your friend pointed out, the standard is the capacity or tendency to deceive.
Which is
Did
insane.
those statements have the capacity to deceive?
Absolutely not, Your Honor, for at least 3 reasons. First of all, they're gap compliant. They're not misrepresentations. All the key things they point to is this was wrong and this was wrong. The unrebutted testimony, certainly in the summary judgment record starting at 17,916, is this is what you do in a financial statement. You are allowed to do this. You are allowed to predict, for example, that you'll get your rent restrictions lifted or you'll get authority for, more units at Aberdeen. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to make optimistic projections. You're allowed to disregard appraisals. What Professor Bartov said is that appraisal could be sitting on your desk and you don't have to rely on it. And there's actually really powerful evidence in this case to show why that's true. Because if you look at 40 Wall Street, they said, in 2011 and 2012, the appraisals of 40 Wall Street were at 200 to 220 million, and you said 527 million. But they overlooked that a couple of years later, Cushman revised its appraisal and said it's worth 540 million, virtually matching what we had said, and they say is misleading. So it's kind of these astonishing issues. It's very similar to the valuation of Mar-a-Lago as $18 million based on a tax assessment. It's preposterous. It's a preposterous position that these factual things. So that's my first answer to that. But secondly, more importantly, we have sophisticated counterparties, as a lot of the questions pointed out. They're getting clear disclaimers. The disclaimers say what everybody already knows you do in this industry. You do your own due diligence. So how is there a capacity or tendency to deceive when you have these very clear disclaimers saying considerable judgment is required here. These values don't reflect what might be realized upon a sale and so forth.
But what about the Attorney General's point that may be true in this case, but we are trying to create a fair and honest marketplace, which will inure to the benefit of the public in the long run?
Yeah, and I would say 2 things in response to that. First, all the questions about line drawing. If this case falls on the other side of the line, there is no line. I mean, you heard, I think, for 15 minutes, respectfully, my colleagues struggle to articulate any clear principle that would put any transaction outside the reach of the statute.
Whatever Tish
on
wants,
the Attorney General's very broad and sweeping view. Yep. So our position is narrow, which is that on the facts of this case, all these things I've referred to, no reliance, no materiality, Deutsche Bank saying we would have given them the exact same deal, and we have clear disclaimers. Surely this is not within the statute. And if this is, There's nothing that falls outside of the statute, and that is a sweeping and unsettling thing. The second point I'd make about that is...
And I'm sorry, just to tie a ribbon around that, do you mean based on the facts as they were adduced on the respective records, the summary judgment motion as to cause of action 1, the trial record as to 2 through 7? Not that the AG didn't have an interest, at least at the outset, in investigating and maybe commencing the proceeding.
We're not disputing that in this.
They certainly have that interest.
You're saying once you got all the facts before the court, which
And that may have been, I wasn't on that case, but that may have been the point of our prior decision, which Mr. Isaac brought up, about this being at the pleading stage. Yes, so it was enough at the pleading stage, but at the end doesn't mean this is what should happen.
That's exactly right, Your Honor. Here we have all the facts before the court.
But the pleadings in this case, I'm sorry, counsel, but the pleading in this case is like a novel. It goes on at length,
Yeah, it's from
327
Tisch.
pages or something like that.
Yeah, it's from
and
Tisch.
basically, those were the facts that Justice Ngoran found were proved at trial. So aren't we bound by our prior decision? I asked this question in another way before.
Very significant variations. I just want to flag one. I see my red light is on. The pleading, the complaint, cites GAP like 50 times. They said these statements are bad because they violate GAP. But you go to the summary judgment record, they have nothing. They don't put anything on GAP. The trial court never cites GAP. Our experts
GAAP is generally accepted accounting principles.
say these are GAP compliant. That's unrebutted. So there's this totally, the record looks totally different once all the facts are in. And I know my time has expired, so I thank the court for its time.
Thank you.
Nailed it. D. John Sauer, man,
I'm
crushed.
actually going to go under my time.
Yeah,
I just
'cause-
have one observation, and I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but this argument, if it doesn't show why not making a summary judgment motion was appropriate, I don't know what is. There was absolutely nothing wrong with what the attorneys did. My adversary said that she's relying on the Ernst & Young case. I read to you what you said. That's exactly what you did. One more point, and I'll sit down. Keep relying on Greenberg. This is what the Greenberg court said, Greenberg 2. Initially, we note that defendants may not raise issues on appeal that were not preserved on the record for our review. So even if they're right about what this court said, and they're not right, it wouldn't matter anyway because lawyers have to preserve issues for all courts that may consider it. They have to look at things not temporally at the time, but what could happen afterward. And given that, and I'm not, this isn't Brian Isaac or it's not Michael Ross, I'm reading to you from the court. They did what they were supposed to do. They did what they had to do. To sanction them is just wrong.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Woo! All right.
Step out, please. Step out.
All right. Look at them shaking hands. Oh, wait, listen. Wait, listen.
Please step out.
What a nice guy. What a nice guy, D. John Sauer. Did you hear him? Open hot mic. He says, really nice to meet you face to face. Really nice to meet you face to face. So what do you guys think about that? Woo! Man, I think they crushed. I think that Tisch is in big trouble. We saw what I think is going to be a 4-1 split on that puppy. Maybe this woman right here in the middle sides with Tisch. She says, well, the statute, you heard her line of questioning. Well, the statute says she can do whatever she wants. It says there is no harm and whatever. So that's fine, as long as the law says it. Tisch can do whatever. But this guy was shocked about the size of the penalty. This guy was questioning why this was even brought in the first place. Sounds like there's at least 3 of them here who say that this could have been dealt with at summary judgment, which would have been much earlier in the case. In other words, Tisch may have had some ability to investigate this, but what is the limiting principle? Can she just go and investigate anybody that she wants if there's no limiting principle, if there's no harm that is required? She can just harass her political opponents? And every little bit of factual, cherry picking that the AG's office came up with to blame Trump for some sort of fraudulent behavior is ridiculous. It's just part of doing business. But the AG's office and prosecutors like that woman who work for the government their whole lives, they don't know how business works. They've never negotiated a deal. They've never built anything. Trump has built and changed the skyline in New York City specifically and elsewhere around the world And these people just want to come and tear it down because they're little communists. So this was a great showing, I got to say. I thought it started out beautifully, ended beautifully. And shout out to the D. John Sauer crew, along with, I believe that's Emil Bove, and they rocked it. So we're going to wait for the opinion here to drop from the Court of Appeals. Hopefully you join us as we do. Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. Thanks for liking this video, and we'll see you back here when we get a ruling. Now, we're not done yet. We've still got more to get to today, my friends. It was a jam-packed day, and so we're going to keep this train on the tracks. Locals, we're going to have to open up a second feed over there, and so hang tight. But we have to do it. So we're going to get part 2 queued up here as we go through this, because we're going to watch some more good stuff, because today we had a task force hearing. And so let's get our bearings straight and see what is going on. Yes, this was a good one. Starting now, the Trump Assassination Task Force met for the very first time to determine what went wrong there in Butler. You can see they gave us a press release on who is speaking, and there were a bunch of people from the local law enforcement agencies who were there. We'll notice Edward Lenz is there, sergeant from the Adams Township Police Department. We've got Drew Blasco, patrolman from the Butler Township PD. John Harold, lieutenant, Pennsylvania State Police. Former U.S. Secret Service agent called Patrick Sullivan. Ariel Goldschmidt, doctor, medical examiner, all came in to testify. Now, as it stands, we're still trying to get to the bottom of what happened there in Butler. To date, the task force has done a bunch of stuff. Over a dozen requests for documents, 23 transcribed interviews, met with FBI and Secret Service. They've got 2,800 pages of documents. We read through a massive Senate report earlier this week on the show. If you missed that, be sure to check that one out. But on Friday, they also now passed legislation giving the Secret Service, or actually giving this task force, more power to investigate the second assassination attempt that happened in Florida. And so what we see is that apparently there was a little bit of a kerfuffle there in the afternoon part of this hearing, saying from the New York Times that the Democrats walked out on the committee hearing. Oh no. Republicans called other Republicans who have military backgrounds, who went and examined the site to talk about what they found. And the Democrats threw a hissy fit. And so let's take a look at what happened in this hearing. You'll see that the membership is comprised of these folks: Mike Kelly, Mark Green, Dave Joyce, Ohio, Tennessee, Pennsylvania in the House, Laurel Lee from Florida, what's up? Michael Waltz was there. Clay Higgins, we'll see what he said. Pat Fallon, Jason Crow. We've also got Luis Correa, Madeline Dean, Glenn Ivey, Chris Houlihan, and Jared Moskowitz. You remember that guy. Was over for the Democrats. But let's zoom in on this, because this hearing started very interestingly with a video from the hearing that showed that they were able to see this guy a lot earlier than we suspected. And so let's listen in on how this hearing went down.
On July 13th. This footage has never been released to the public, and it has been edited to show relevant parts. The video, as you will see from the timestamp in the upper right-hand corner, begins at 18:08, or 8 minutes after 6 p.m. In the first 12 seconds of the video, you will see a figure circled in red crossing the roofs of multiple AGR buildings. This man is Thomas Crooks. You will then see the patrol car begin moving toward the AGR buildings, and we lose sight of Crooks, but about 19 seconds into the video, he reappears. Again, we have circled him in red before we lose sight of him at about 20 seconds later. Now, we cut the video for length, so it picks up at about a minute and a half later at 6:10 p.m. and 38 seconds. Here you will see law enforcement around the AGR building. At this point, all law enforcement entities staffing the rally are aware that there is an individual on the roof of AGR, but they do not know he is armed. Behind the trees, you will see one officer attempting to lift another officer up onto the roof, and you will see that officer pull himself up and look to the left. According to that officer's interview with the task force, he sees Crooks with the long gun, and Crooks turns and points the weapon in his direction. The officer then falls to the ground, injuring his ankle, and radios that the man on the roof is armed at 11 minutes after 6. That portion of the video ends here. We know that the first shot from Crooks is fired just 32 seconds later. We will play the video now.
All right, let's watch. Video is
This will take
playing
about
now.
51 seconds.
See, the video is playing on the track. There we go. There's Crooks running on the roof. You can see him. Wow. He's pulling himself up right there. Jumped off. Just got the gun pointed at him and runs back. Wow. Okay. That was
I realize it's hard to see some of this, but so Crooks, as he makes his way across the roof, this is, by the way, a Pennsylvania State Police cruiser, and it has the dash cam. So you're able to see some things that nobody else was able to see, but I know it's difficult. Lieutenant Harold, I'm going to direct the first line of questioning to you, since this is state police footage. Footage and evidence show that Crooks was on the roof of the AGR building for over 3 minutes before shots were fired.
wild.
Lieutenant Harold, please describe those few minutes leading up to the shots fired from your vantage point.
My position when the shots were fired, I was behind the stage. I can't answer to any questions regarding Mr. Crooks on the roof because I did not have that information. I was behind the stage. It was very loud, and if it was transmitted over our portables, I did not hear that. But I had returned to my car briefly once the former president had taken the stage to retrieve a cell phone that had FirstNet, and then I was returning back to the stage when the first shot rang out.
Officer Blasco, same question.
At that time, I was at Brady Paul, and I was working my way over to the AGR building to assist other Butler Township units with looking for Crooks. As I got to the water tower, I parked underneath the water tower and began to make my way to AGR. That's when the shots rang out.
All right, so we get some more conversation about that. And this was another interesting exchange. So this guy is a Democrat, Jason Crow from Colorado, and he served in the Army, and he's going to explain or really ask questions that we've been asking here for a long time about the communication. And from the very beginning, we've been asking about a unified command center because we knew that they were not on the same radio. And we know that the Secret Service were communicating via radio, and all that radio communication is gone because none of it was recorded. And so we were saying, okay, well, is there a parallel with somebody in the room? Like, can anybody else be a witness to what they observe from the Secret Service? Maybe they were in the same command center. So in other words, local cops could buzz it in. Hey, I just saw a dude with a gun on the roof. He buzzes it in after he falls. And then he's sitting the local cop is sitting right next to the Secret Service agent. He goes, wait, what? Yo, bro, there's a guy on the roof. You're kidding. There's a guy on the roof. Calls it into the Secret Service then, right? And then they get the whole thing situated. But that never happened. They were in totally separate locations, totally different, not communicating at all.
Communications. Without unity of command and effective communications, a unit cannot operate. So one of the things I'm struggling with is this idea that there wasn't a single unified command station on site. The Secret Service did not establish that. Is that atypical in your experience? Would there normally be one command and control station to unify command and communications?
Yes, that's very atypical. I am very surprised. Normally there will be an overall command post for the entire visit. Then each site will have what's called a security room where radio traffic pertinent to that individual site is controlled. And the command post, the overall command post, should be the state, local police, Secret Service, and other federal partners that may be assisting. So this is very unusual that the way it turned out here at this site.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense?
Felt a little unusual to us too, and we're not even Secret Service agents. Why would the Secret Service not want to hear from local police who could be warning them about a shooter on a roof?
In this instance, as to why that might occur? Are there instances where, when you're conducting an event, you would do multiple command posts, or can you not see why that would be the case?
Well, it's a misnomer, Congressman. The multiple command posts, the Secret Service always has security rooms at individual sites, and they may be termed a command post, but it's really a mini command post. There should be just one overall command post, and each site has their own kind of communication center where information relative to that site will be transmitted. For example, the airport agents or security there really are not concerned what's happening at the other sites because they're only concerned about the airport. So there'd be a security room just for the airport site.
It's probably safe to say that, time and speed is really important, right? Because the idea behind that, and I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but the idea behind that is if there's something identified as being wrong, a suspicious person, that has to be very quickly communicated, right?
Yeah, this is how it should happen. The protective detail is on one specific frequency, Secret Service frequency, and only the protective details on that frequency. The post standers are on a second frequency, and the tactical teams are on a third frequency, but the other tactical teams monitor all three frequencies at the same time. So if something happens, it's at the security room's responsibility to immediately get on the radio on the details frequency and say, there's an issue, remove the protectee from the stage or cover and evacuate. Yeah. That's what's supposed to happen. And that's what's drilled into every Secret Service agent. There has to be, because the detail agents, don't forget, they can't listen to all the other traffic. They have to be rock solid on protecting the president or the presidential candidate. So their frequency is just for their individual movements.
So in this instance, based upon what you know and what you heard from Commander Lentz and Mr. Blasco, a suspicious person was identified with a rangefinder. Pictures were taken of this person moving around a building, so much so that it drew the attention of one of the sniper teams who took pictures of it. If that information had been effectively communicated to the FBI, or if the FBI, I guess to rephrase that, had set up a communication system and a command post to receive that information,
the Secret Service, rather,
would that have been a situation where you would say the protectee shouldn't go on stage until we resolve this?
Congressman Kerr, you mean the Secret Service, not FBI?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Secret Service, right.
Yes, sir. What should have happened, in my opinion, is when the suspicious person was identified, the detail leader and the shift agent should have been told there's an issue, we're working a suspicious person. And then at that point, it was probably would be inappropriate to remove the president from the stage, but the detail leader should know there's an issue, I may have to react quicker. So at a minimum, when there's a suspicious person, the detail leader and the shift agent should be told there's an issue.
And in your experience, have there been situations when you've been on service as a Secret Service agent where that has come up, where you've had to, pause an event or respond to something until it's been addressed?
Yes, that has happened during my career. I've never had a dramatic situation where we had to remove the president from the stage, but we've had situations where the shift agents are told, we got a situation, there's a suspicious person in the front row. And then you have to mitigate that. Usually the protective intelligence team will then come, take that person and conduct an interview, remove that person from the rope line, as an example, and you don't have to take the president off stage or interrupt the president's movements.
Yeah, sounds like a reasonable way to approach all of this. Too bad that guy is a former Secret Service agent and not a current Secret Service agent. Maybe we'd still have Corey Compatore alive. Now, there were also problems with communication, and we spent some time talking about this yesterday. Apparently, their radios were not even working at the Secret Service agency.
The local command post, there was no way for us to hear any of the Secret Service radio traffic.
So for those of us who are of a certain age, I was in my early mid-20s during September 11th. This was almost exactly what I remember being the problem in terms of responding to September 11th, that there were all kinds of really well-intentioned, very well-trained people, but none of whom could hear one another or communicate with one another. It feels as though we haven't made a whole lot of progress on that. In your view, what would have been a better way to have this communication?
Sure, it's not feasible to have everybody communicate on the same channel just because the amount of radio traffic. However, a unified command post, as we're all taught in many different FEMA classes. Unified Command Post solves that issue.
Why did
Yes,
they
and I
have that?
know Representative Crow started this conversation with sort of being aghast at the fact that there were clearly more than one command post, and that in some cases, my understanding is some people didn't even know that there were more than one command post, and so that's certainly a gap too. So here we were with 3 minutes and every second counting, and the Secret Service and the state police weren't able to directly hear what local law enforcement actually saw.
Weird.
Because they didn't have that interoperability with local law enforcement frequencies and didn't have possession of those radios. Given how important that communication is in communicating in a crisis, clearly one of the findings of our investigation ought to be that there needs to be certainly reform in terms of the technological communications that are going on here. My colleagues had a little bit of extra time, and with my remaining time, I'd like to ask a question about the drones. I understand that the drone technology that the Secret Service had didn't work that day. My understanding is that the person who was trying to assassinate the former president's technology did work that day. The last question that I have for you is we're always trying to solve for the last problem that we had, you know, a shooter, a sniper. To me, we should be solving for the future problems that we aren't seeing coming around the corner, and those are emerging threats, evolving threats such as drone technologies. Gentlemen, do you have anything that keeps you up at night that isn't sort of the traditional sniper on a rooftop?
Yeah, I believe that we've probably all considered the emerging threat that would be coming from a drone. I would say at our level, I have no means to mitigate that at this point.
And that's actually something that we can also help with, and Congress has pieces of legislation myself.
All right, so they continue on there. Now, let's fast forward. We also had Clay Higgins was here, and I wanted to listen to a little bit of what he had to say. So let's see what Representative Higgins had to say, because he posted his own report, and he was also under the theory that there was a first shot that went and exploded Crooks's gun. And so we were asking how many shots were there in total. Let's see what Higgins says.
As a representative from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, I'm going to be moving fast. And Mr. Chairman, let me assure you, we're going to get to the bottom of everything that happened on J13. We're going to determine what happened, when, precisely the timeline, what went right, what went wrong, where were their failures, where was their heroic action. We're going to thoroughly and calmly investigate the entire incident, the attempted assassination of former President Trump, and we're going to provide an excellent report to the American people in December. So we're in the middle of this thing right now, and I have to cover a lot of territory in a very few minutes. Commander Lenz, you're the commander of the entire tactical unit for Butler County. That's a multiple agency unit that's assembled across the county, and you're in command. I just want to clarify that. Did you command and supervise the drone team on the morning of J13 to observe and sanitize and clear the entire property, including the water tower?
Spray it off.
We had a private company that offered to fly a drone.
They were under your command?
Correct. Yeah.
Thank
under
you.
my, yep.
And was that sophisticated drone equipment? Or?
As far as I understand it, yes.
Yes, sir.
So not the hosing off.
Did you post 2 patrol response units at the water tower for J13?
I did not. I had no actual decision-making as far as the planning goes for where
So
the perimeter people.
Was it your understanding that there were 2 patrol response units parked in the vicinity of the water tower on J13?
I do believe at some point there were.
Okay, as we're trying to get to. And was the water tower ladder, which is about 25 feet high, was it ever lowered that day?
No.
Thank you very much. Regarding radio communications, in the pre-mission briefing, you were involved extensively in that in the couple of weeks prior to J13. That's my understanding.
Yes.
Thank you. Regarding radio communications with the visiting federal agencies with jurisdictional authority to protect the former president, the Secret Service, did Butler County ESU, your unit, provide particular radios for the Secret Service or set aside radios for the Secret Service?
We did.
You did.
Did they pick 'em up?
Did you personally call the Secret Service counter sniper teams and remind them to pick up their particular radios on the morning of J13?
So I had spoken to them at the walkthrough and offered the radios.
That was on Thursday.
Correct. And then the day of the rally, our sniper team leader, when they did their face-to-face, he reminded them that the radios.
Yes. Did they ever pick up those radios?
They did not.
And so those two counter sniper teams for the Secret Service were posted up on roofs. There was a northern counter sniper team, which ultimately did not take a shot on Crooks because their line of sight was blocked by a couple of trees. I believe then the southern counter sniper team, which ultimately did fire the killing shot at Crooks, they were up on roofs by themselves, correct?
Yes.
Mr. Sullivan, would have been helpful. You said it was absolutely unacceptable for there to not be direct radio communications. Would it have been helpful for the Secret Service to pick up the radios that the Butler County ESU had provided for them and reminded them to pick up?
Absolutely.
Especially up on a roof, being isolated as these counter sniper teams are.
Yes,
they didn't have that radio communication.
No, would have been
Let me
helpful.
clarify that the local Butler County ESU, in command of all the local forces assisting Secret Service that day, attempted to deliver radio communication to the counter sniper teams. My goodness, time rolls quickly. I'd like to jump into shot number 9. Shot number 9, during the interviews with the Secret Service and FBI, they commonly step over shot number 9. They say Crooks fired 8 rounds and then the Secret Service fired the killing shot, shot number 10. But there was a shot number 9 fired, was there not, Mr. Lenz?
There was.
Okay, Commander, I'm gonna quote from the transcribed interview of Aaron Zalapone. That's a tactical SWAT officer under your command that took shot number 9. He was deployed. He heard the radio traffic. He saw the commotion. He left his deployed position and ran into a position where he thought he might be able to get a shot on if there was a shooter up on a roof, somebody on a roof. He said seconds after that is whenever the first 3 shots were fired. So I hear the first 3, crack, crack, crack. And at this point, I'm like, okay, where we at here? I look up, that's when I see Crooks. I got his head, his shoulders. I can see a rifle. At that point, I hear another crack. That's when I start pulling my weapon up. He gets 3 off. As I'm getting my target acquired, I'm getting my red dot up. I can see the gas emit from his barrel, his muzzle. Then right after that, I hear the snap of his 5th shot go off. Then immediately after that, I press one off, and that's when he immediately goes down. When I say goes down, it wasn't like he was ducking to get out of the way. I mean, I know I hit him. Like, there's no doubt about it. He goes down. He kind of jerks to the right, and then he slumps over slowly, and then kind of slowly rolls backward out of my field of view. So at that point, I did not have a second shot. At that point, he tries to recover. 2 seconds after that, the Secret Service, from a different vantage point, a higher vantage point, takes the killing shot. So my final question, if I may, to the doctor. Are you here with us, Doctor?
Yes, I am.
Dr. Goldschmidt. You stated, sir, and I know you're doing your best. You performed the autopsy. I've observed your work. I think it was very professional work, in my opinion. You stated that there was only 1 bullet wound. I accept that you had only 1 observable bullet wound. Are you there, Doctor?
Yes, I am.
Thank you very much. Could the injuries on Crooks' shoulders have been caused by a combined impact of Butler County ESU shot number 9 striking somewhere in the vicinity of the buttstock of Crooks' rifle and some fragmenting from that impact? Could the injuries on Crooks' shoulders have been caused by a combination of shot number 9 and shot number 10? Is that possible?
No, I don't believe so.
You don't believe it's possible. Does that mean it's possible?
No, it's not possible.
It's not possible. So I respect your testimony, but how would you determine if you removed only 1 fragment of a bullet The FBI recovered no other bullets, that's our understanding, no other projectiles other than the partial projectile that you recovered from his shoulder. So you don't know where shot number 9 went, did you, Doctor?
Correct.
Okay. So is it not possible, you're saying it's not possible that shot number 9 went all the way through Crooks, and you had no way of knowing that because it was in the same wound that was further affected by shot number 10. You're saying that's not possible.
Interesting.
The body, there was no evidence on the body of that occurrence.
There you go, sir. That's different than impossible. Listen, thank you all for testifying today. Mr. Chairman, thank you for holding this first very important hearing. We shall do more and we shall complete our work professionally. Thank you, sir. I yield.
All right.
Yes,
So
sir. Thank you.
I think what we heard him say is that maybe the bullet or a portion of the bullet from shot number 9, which was from the local sniper. Remember, Crooks was there kind of posting up on the roof. And the sniper from the local cops came, hit the butt of the rifle, theoretically, exploded the back of the rifle. Then he stands up, oh, and then Secret Service pops him right there and he's done. Now, did this one, okay, come down this direction, go through the head or through the face, and then hit the shoulder simultaneously with that other sniper shooting and hitting the butt stock, right? So it's like through here, into here, and here. See that? All going into each other. Maybe you couldn't see that because it looked like, you know, they went through the same trajectory or something. Or a shrapnel from when it hit this shoulder, and the shrapnel, you know, it's the same wound, and he couldn't differentiate the two of them. So interesting line of questioning there from Clay Higgins. They took a lunch break. The Democrats stormed out of there like little babies, and the Republicans called in Representative Corey Mills, who is somebody who is a combat veteran. And so they brought him in to see what he had to say about this, and here's how that went.
Confidence that we did what we were supposed to do, what we were tasked to do. So I thank you so much for being here. You all have kept that standard up. Now recognize Representative Mills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to first take a moment just to correct the record that my actual time as a designated defensive marksman and counter sniper was as a contractor of the U.S. State Department on a protective detail, not as a military sniper. So while I was honored to serve as a combat veteran with the 82nd Airborne Division, I don't hold that permissibility in that billet. I want to talk today a little bit about what took place, but also what I see as the actual perimeter failures that has continued to be a reoccurring issue, whether that be in Butler, PA, or whether it be the most recent assassination attempt in Florida. But before I do that, I also want to take a moment just to recognize the loss of Corey Compatour. His family deserves to continue to have the accountability research and also investigation into what actually caused the death of a father, a husband, and a family member. My thoughts and prayers remain with Corey Compatour's family.
Cheers and amen.
I also want to look at what our findings have been, as both myself and my colleague and really close friend, Rep. Crane, has found. It is clear that Butler County, PA, as well as for the ESU teams and the Secret Service, had a failure in their overall coordination. That the perimeter establishment and the actual ownership belongs to that of the Secret Service, as well as for the failures on that day of July 13th in Butler, PA. We realize, as it's been mentioned earlier, that there was a breakdown in not only the misuse of any compatible communication capabilities, but also a lack of a joint operations center that could have allowed for each of the individual units to be able to communicate in a more efficient fashion that would have led to a faster response element. We also know that while there could have been potential drone capabilities that was being utilized, that the Secret Service themselves had actually refused to utilize those for their benefits, which also could have helped the counter snipers who were sitting in their positions. There was also a lack of coordination when it came to who was actually going to take over the position on the AGR building, where Butler understood the idea that it was the Secret Service who was responsible for the positioning, but yet the Secret Service failed to actually show up to the morning coordination meeting. While all of these repeated perimeter failures, whether it be the 150-meter shot that was taken by Thomas Crooks or the potential assailant that was looking at a 500-yard distance from Florida, the thing that we've established is that no one is looking at what is happening and going on with regards to the Secret Service's cultural issues. This is not a budgetary issue, and I want it to be clear that we cannot treat this as DC has continued to treat things, where we throw money at problems in hopes that it's actually going to cause that to be a solution. This breaks it down into three simple things. One is poor leadership of the United States Secret Service, whether that be under Director Cheadle or whether it be under Rowe. To quote Dan Bongino, who is actually a former Secret Service agent, he said that he does not feel any safer or better now than he did under Cheadle, having Rowe in the helm. I think leadership, as we can all admit to, whether it be in the military, the police force, or whether it be here in the House, leadership is one of the things that we must rely upon heavily, and there is a crisis in leadership. I also want to look at the fact that there is a prioritization across not just our military, but other departments and agencies to prioritize diversity, equity, inclusion under DEI, the meritocracy and readiness of our actual capabilities on the ground.
And we saw
but
that.
the further thing that I
during their
think is
committee
needing to be
hearings
explored
when nobody
is the
signed off on
doctrine
the plans
itself that is
at
being
all.
utilized by the U.S. Secret Service. For too long, they've continued to go under a very specific and very understandable thing where whatever your title is that you hold results in the amount of resources and assets that are being allocated. This is a failure by any of us who understand security, or anyone who's even got a basic knowledge of security, that you must conduct the necessary threat analysis to determine the risk management matrix that then determines what the assets and resources that should be allocated. This is not as simple as saying that you're a former president and therefore there is a one-size-fits-all for Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, President Bush, or former President Donald J. Trump.
That's right.
We must acknowledge the fact that what we're looking at now is also the fact that so much time has passed and so much
and they burned
of the
body
actual
too.
potential evidence has been destroyed or put away, that purposeful intent is now indistinguishable from criminal negligence. Having laid in the actual position where Thomas Crooks took the shot above and upon the AGR building, as well as having sat with Rep. Crane and ranged the position from the counter sniper teams where the alleged shot was taking place, this is something that should have been preventable and should have been known to the counter sniper teams. I want to also point out the fact that, as Rep. Crane discussed, I think that until the actual problem and the solution can be found for the Secret Service with the three key areas that I've talked about, that a private security detail who does not have any political agenda or affiliation to protect the president is what my recommendation would be, to ensure that the inner core is basically protected at all times, utilizing his available Secret Service assets and resources to be pushed out further to allow that perimeter failure to be completed. I want to thank the task force for giving me the opportunity to actually testify before you. And I want to point out that when we're looking at the map that's behind you, Mr. Chairman, that it is not just the AGR building 150 yards away approximately that was the issue, but even if you look directly to the 12 o'clock of the stage, you have the Kubota dealership, which is only within about a 400-yard shot placement, which Rep. Crane and many snipers and counter snipers can tell you is a very feasible shot.
Maybe up here.
When speaking to the Kubota dealer, we noted the fact that not a single Secret Service or local law enforcement agent had ever talked to that dealership to ask them whether or not they could put any snipers on the rooftop, or whether or not they could actually utilize that as an overwatch position. If you look to what would be from my vantage point right now, which is the 3 o'clock, which would be the 9 o'clock for the president, that was the area that was actually the third counter sniper team that one of our whistleblowers, Ben Schaefer, had talked about from his vantage point and being able to see Thomas Crooks at an earlier time. Mr. Chairman, I point these things out to the committee, and again, to echo my good friend Representative Crane, I challenge you to continue to go forward and to not be feared away from the idea of being labeled a conspiracist by looking into every possible outcome, being able to look at every possible provided video, listen to every single testimony of each individual whistleblower. But I also pledge my continued support for the task force, as does Rep. Crane, to provide information, intel, and any of our findings to help further this investigation. While it is an independent investigation, I want you to know that it is not exclusive of the efforts in which you are taking, and that we are here to work together to try and find a solution to improve our Secret Service and to guarantee the protection of not just President Donald J. Trump, but any of the actual nominees on either side of the aisle. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
All right, so that was Corey Mills, representative, and he's out there in Florida. And so we had a full hearing today. We'll see what the task force does next. They are, of course, conducting a bunch of interviews. They have a bunch of letters out. And so far, the Secret Service apparently has not been very forthcoming, as we've seen in other reports, like the Senate report that came out from Rand Paul that we covered yesterday on the show. So if the Secret Service and Homeland Security and the rest of these federal agencies are not willing to play ball with Congress, why is Congress playing ball with them? Why is Congress continuing to fund them while they're not even recording their radio calls? We'll continue to cover it. Let's see what you say about this, my friends. It's been a long one and a fun one. Thanks for joining us if you're still with us after almost 3 hours. It's been a heck of a stream. We've covered a lot of ground. If you're just joining us and you missed the beginning, let's recap what we talked about today. Trump was out, totally exonerated on J6. General Milley, SecDef Miller, they told Trump, we've got a plan. We've got it covered. Turns out they didn't have a plan, or maybe their plan was failure so that they could pin it on Trump. We read through Mark Milley's entire, that's not what I wanted to do, Mark Milley's entire transcript when he sat down for an interview on April 16th, and there was some good stuff in there that I think revealed how this whole operation was planning. They put the DOJ in charge of it, and then it was just basically bedlam after the event happened. Nobody was really focused on before, and then suddenly it happened, and then they were scrambling to get people there. So we covered all of that. We also talked about all these other quotes and statements from William Walker, National Guard, Earl Matthews, Major Michael Brooks, and just massacred this page with red ink. Then we turned our attention to the New York Appellate Division, where Tish James, Letitia Stinkyfoot in her courtrooms where she takes her shoes off there, had a rough day. Predictions will say, I hope 4-1, maybe 5-0, that the Tish decision, the Tish verdict will be reversed or reduced dramatically, sending that back down to Engoron, maybe even dismissing the whole case. I don't know. We'll see where that one goes. But now we wait until they issue their opinion. But she did not have a good day. And then, of course, we went through the task force hearing, the J13 task force, learned some good stuff, including the incredulity, really, that about the lack of a unified command center. Nobody could really even believe it, that people who are supposedly leading the most prestigious security apparatus in the whole world couldn't even follow basic procedure and got someone killed as a result. But now, my friends, let's hear from you. Thank you so much for subscribing to our channel. Thank you so much for inviting someone you know or love to check out our channel. You can tell them that I made you share the channel. You can just tell them. Just say, the guy's a jerk, man. He made me share this channel. Blame me for it. I'm happy with that. But let's get him over here, my friends, because we've got a lot of this business to attend to, and we're really grateful for your support. Thank you so much for doing that. Now, let's see who is here and joining us on the day. It's a beautiful day. It's a beautiful Thursday. You know what that means. Tomorrow is Friday. And so let's see who's joining us over on the tubes and elsewhere. And let's see, John Libby. What's up, John Libby? Of course, if you're a membo, I see we got some new membos. So membos, this morning we talked about, if you're a new membo, we talked about the Mayor Adams indictment. We read through the full indictment this morning on our members stream. And then we also talked about Kamala's terrible interview with Stephanie Ruhle yesterday on MSNBC. So if you're a new member and you're just joining, make sure you catch that from this morning. And members, we'll see you tomorrow morning for our members only stream. If you're a member, we record extra stuff together in the mornings. It's a lot of fun. John Libby says, Rob, from this morning, don't be a Humpty Dumpty. And I think there was a crack about my tight pants or something. Yeah, John Libby says, yeah, the no pants Zoom call guy, which was Stelter, right? Like he sat there like in his boxers or something weird. I made a crack that I wasn't wearing pants. And maybe I'm not. You never know. That's the whole point. Hey, P-Dog Knight, what's up? Membo for 2 months. Hey, what's up, P-Dog? Thanks for being here for 2 months. First month's the hardest. Gets easier from there. Says, fairly new membo. Never disappointed. Cheers. Cheers to you, P-Dog. Thanks for joining us, man. We'll see you tomorrow morning on the stream. Hey, James Butler says, speaking of books, my Biden laptop report book arrived. Shout out. Amazing. Along with my new King James Version Lion Bible by Humble Lamb. One is debauchery, the other is the word of God. Humble lamb makes beautiful Bibles. That sounds awesome. I have not heard of that, but it sounds like a great referral. Lion Bible by Humble Lamb. That sounds awesome. Yeah, it's true. And you're going to need both of them in your house because that book is filled with Hunter. Hey, what's up, Sheila Poo? And now the documentation is there to prove that once again, Donald Trump was right and the Democrats lied. That's all they do. Just show us the evidence and we'll make our own judgments. Why do you have to redact and bury a bunch of stuff and then it leaks out years later because they're liars? Thank you, Sheila. Hey, Stephen Mosher says, talk about the March 1st, 1954 attack on Congress and that insurrection that wasn't an insurrection. Thank you, Stephen. Hey, Biology Always Wins says, I am convinced that all our agencies get all their treason ideas from movies. Hubby and I wanted old movies while he healed from his second heart attack. Well, I hope he heals quickly. Sorry to hear about that. He said, isn't that happening now? That's 8 years ago. Yeah, I think this is right. I feel like this is, I think there's some evidence, right? If you listen to Alex Jones or some of those guys, like the guys who know better than I do on these topics, would say that the CIA seeds narratives through popular media. In fact, there's a whole thesis that the CIA created gangster rap and all the things as a mechanism to fill the prisons and so on. So I feel like there is a lot of that too. The other one that I thought of that was very interesting was the one in Westworld, where I think in season 3 they build like a massive super AI, and that super AI is taking over the world and predicting what people are doing. If you remember that season, I have a feeling like that already exists. If you understand what I'm saying, like they showed us that. It already exists. We'll learn about it in 10 years, right? And then you look at all of the the man porn, not like that like actual porn, but like man porn, like novels and stuff like that, which I can get into too. Like the what's the one that I was into for a minute? Oh, the Gray Man novels. Those are pretty fun. But they're all like ex-CIA folks, all ex-CIA people. I look through these Audible books, and these books is like ex-CIA, ex-DOD, ex-Navy SEAL, it's like, oh gosh. And they all turn out, most of them are ex-CIA actually, when you think about it. Not even like Navy SEAL or those other people. It's all ex-CIA, and they're like amazing heroes who are doing right. Yeah, Jack Ryan was the other one. That one was like obvious, right? Jack Ryan on Amazon. It's like, did the CIA write this themselves? It feels like it, because they're like, the CIA is saving puppies this episode. It feels like it's programming. That might be why they call it programming. John Libby, what's up? Says, all that red. You're not practicing to be a Haitian, are you? I don't know. Is that some voodoo comment or something? I don't know. Now I'm going to get charged with crimes for that, John Libby. The Haitians are charging people with crimes. Another felony coming my way. Sheila Poo. 1,000,000 hugs to you. Thank you, Sheila. Look at this. Bringing in 5 membos. Greg Gonzalez. Karen Vaughn is coming in. Tara Eggers. Christy Lamoli. And Disco Duck. All gifted membos, courtesy of the one and only Sheila Poo. Thank you, Sheila, for bringing them in. Hey, I saw a couple comments about this. Is this for real, or did they capture him? Nathan Wade, what's the story? U.S. Marshals, House Judiciary Committee asks the Marshals to serve Nathan Wade. Nathan Wade nowhere to be found. Did they find the guy yet? All right, here's this report. Major manhunt underway by U.S. Marshals for Nathan Wade, Fannie Willis's lover boy and former Fulton County lead investigator. Oh, yeah, we know who he is. Where's my Nathan's hot dog hat from Tremendous? It's over there. Yeah. Did they find him yet? Is he still on the run? I'm telling you. Check Belize. He's probably in Belize with Kimberly Cheadle. He got a new side piece. Actually, he was still with Fannie. He showed up with Fannie at the daughter's new criminal charges. Shane Sousa, what's up, Shane? Says, hey, like this video, share this video, and subscribe. And don't forget to hit that notification bell either. Thank you, Shane. It's a good reminder. Hey, what's up? Sheila Poo. 5 more membos coming in. You rock. We got Debbie Harkness is here. Magoose in the house. Mega Mindy Lou. Papa Joe's here. And Gail Q. Gifted membos, courtesy of Sheila. Thank you, Sheila. This one from Esther. Thank you, Esther, for this one. Says, the assassination attempts, the J6 hearings, J6, the indictments, lawsuits, debates, ransoms, all of it staged or accommodated by the Dems, engineered. And I think they're actually setting up command centers, speaking about command centers, in order to wage lawfare and to wage their war. It's not us just complaining about this either. RFK Jr. agrees. Milo Phone Bill says, did they bring suspected pipe bombs into a meeting with the general? Huh? I don't know. Or did he send them out? Who knows? Hey, what's up? Patriot Rob says, I don't know about you guys, but I'm starting to feel like everything has started leaning towards Trump. Media, courts, his rivals. Yeah, I don't know if it's leaning towards him, but it's just normalizing a little bit. Like, it's just a little bit normal. Like, the lower level district courts was insanity. Fannie with McAfee, Engeron with Trump and Tisch. We got Chutkin with the DC J6 case. Lunacy. But then when you get up to the Court of Appeals, the Supreme Court, things get a little bit more sane. And so Trump's not getting any benefits. He's just getting like a fair look a little bit for once at some of these junctures. It's a great comment. Thank you, Patriot Rob. Hey, Poppy is in the house. What's up, Poppy? We got 10 membos coming in, courtesy of Poppy. Look who's here. C226, welcome. Chrissy's coming in. Dixie Dogs. Liz is here. Lola LaShawn, welcome. Texas Beast is here. Will Call Magic. Danny's in the house. Pie Wacket. The General, the Outlaw, General Bacon. Gifted membos, courtesy of Poppy. Thank you, Poppy. Hey, Goofy for Jesus is here. Moshi, y'all. Been a membo for 9 months. That is a brand new baby in the house. So congrats to Goofy for Jesus, new baby in the house. Says, did Not a Real Boy release his book report today? So she's talking about Jack Smith, who really wants to be a real boy, but he's not a real boy. I want to be a real boy. You're not. So good question. I think he had to file it today, but he filed it under seal, is my understanding. So Chutkin will then decide what can be publicized. And so I think we'll see the final publication later, once the unsealed version is publicly filed. What's up, Voice of the People? Says, over the summer before the 6th, you mean when the White House was attacked and they played it off as gassing peaceful protesters with the church on fire? Yeah, the other insurrection that didn't matter. The real insurrection that didn't matter. Only anything Trump does or says is bad, but everyone else can burn down cities. Kamala can even get him out of custody. Lenny Malley, what's up? Says, please show Robert some love. Please. We need it. And smash that like button, baby. Thank you, Lenny. Brian Bishop. Thank you, Brian, for the dono and for being here today. Sheila Poo says, OMG, the judge's question is spot on. Yeah, that first judge's question was so beautiful. He's been waiting for this day. He's like, all right, here's my time. Why are you so terrible? And just went through the whole list. It was great. Brian Bishop says, the New York Appellate Court, smash, baby. It was good. Hey, look at this one. Oh, isn't this a fun one? From Michael Waller. Listen to this one. Hey, Rob, I got in at the Trump North Carolina rally yesterday. Unlike you not getting in to the Arizona rally. This person is now banned from the show and from my entire life. Just kidding, Michael. That's a really funny comment. I'm not mad about it, though, because I got to see other amazing friends in Arizona. Really funny comment. Thank you for that, Michael. Thank you for the nice dono, brother. I'm really glad you got in. I hope you had a great time. I'm going to try to get into the next one. Dang it. Thanks for rubbing it in. Oh, gosh. All right. Thank you, Michael. Funny comment. Hey, Revco says, that might be the fastest smackdown by a judge I've ever seen. If that is how this is starting, things look pretty bad for James. Yeah, it does. It was great. He came out of the gates, man, just fired up. And we love to see it. You love to see it. She should. And that's the exact reception they should have gotten. Chubby says, that prosecutor lady felt attacked, man. She was screeching into that microphone. She was really laying down the vocal cords for sure. Rub some dirt on it. Says the lady doth protest too much, methinks. Little Shakespeare there. What's up? Crash says, Rob, by my count, all 5 of the black robes were beating up on this woman and her argument. She came in thinking that these non-New York City jurists were going to be rabid never Trumpers. Wrong. Yeah, because the case was just like nuts. It was lunacy. And I think they recognize it. Now, the one woman in the middle, it might be 5-0. She might agree. Jeffrey Adams says, okay, just as Nathan Wade was scheduled to testify before the House Judiciary Committee, he vanishes and the U.S. Marshals are on a manhunt looking for him. Did somebody check Fanny's closet, honestly? Just go over to her house. Just go. Is he under your bed? Is he under there? No, he's not. Is he? Come on, Fanny, let us in. Revco says, okay, so the Trump case, there was no victim. There was no complaint by the lenders. All terms were fulfilled, but Orange Man bad. Nailed it. The issue is that they are claiming power to deem anything a crime. You're exactly right. Yeah, there was no limit. Even the judges. So does there have to be harm? No. Does it have to be material? No. Is there any jurisdictional limit at all? No. It's discretionary, essentially. Will H, what's up? Membo for 6 months says, where can we find this report that they cite? Will H, which report are we talking about? So in the New York trial, I mean, there's anything that they reference there would be exhibits, filings. I think, who is it? Courthouse News, I think, is keeping a nice tracker, or Lawfare is keeping a nice tracker of the Engeron case. But if it's the Senate report for the J13th thing, we talked about that yesterday, and I would just look up the Senate Homeland report on J13th. That just came out yesterday. So otherwise, I'm not sure which report you're citing. But thank you, Will H., for being a member for 6 months. We really appreciate that. Hey, B-Man, another one. Manhunt for Nathan Wade underway. Should definitely check Fanny's bedroom. Hey, Sheila Poo, a million hugs to you. 5 more membos from Sheila. Thank you, Sheila. 5 gigahertz in the house. Definitely don't want 2.5 gigahertz or whatever that old standard was. Who cares? Forget about it. Cemetery Shop, what's up? Max Chessman here. W. McMaster and Warcry gifted membos courtesy of Sheila Poo. Jack Mack, what's up? 13 months as a membo. Baker's dozen here. Says little encouraged after the New York Supreme Court hearing. Yeah, that was a good one. I agree. It felt good. It was nice to see the judges ask some nice questions and dig into it. Hey, CGI Joe is in the house. CGI Joe, way to go. We love you. Hey, 10 membos coming in. Artsy Chick, welcome Artsy Chick. Arc, the link is here. Just Peas Girl, Salty, Nicole B, GSG McLovin, Miss Nell, Bruce Choate, Mick Kevin, and Netcat Media gifted membos courtesy of CGI Joe. Way to go, Joe. CF Rob, what's up? Says President Trump came to New Orleans. The military plane that carries the beast arrived a day before with Secret Service. One Secret Service group stayed at the airport with the plane. Others left to secure the paths to the event. Sharpening Man in Texas. Membo for 7 months. Thank you for that. Almost 2 months. And then we got a baby. Says, sorry, but this smells like fish. The J13th situation, I think, is what you're referencing there. Thank you for that. Hey, Poppy with 10 more membos. Thank you, Poppy. Check this one out. We got REU, Andrew Davis, Nigel Word, Captain RB, Top of Mind, welcome, Kimmy G, Melissa Hardy, Deborah Young, Colin Talbert, and Don Soderswath. Wait, in the house, courtesy of Poppy. Thank you, Poppy, for bringing in the 10 new membos. We're excited to meet them. We got Patriot Rob, says, oh, wow, the Secret Service took the credit. It's about right. Par for the course. What you get when you have the Secret Service there. More membos from CGI Joe. Way to go, Joe. Bringing in Cherie Shields, Pathfinder, OFUX, Salty Vet Dead is here. Brenda 33, Scuba Diva, Mick E, Brian and Sarah James Sway, and Kevin and the Fish. Gifted membos courtesy of CGI Joe. Welcome aboard, new friends. Can't wait to meet the new membos. Hey, Michelle Perkins. Hi, Rob. Much love to you. Much love to you back, Michelle Perkins. Thanks for joining us today and for sending in some dono love. We got Super Buff Shaft. Says, Robert and Mod love. When are you going to take Hobbs down? And Arizona GOP Gina is deep state. Arizona 12 News did a hit piece on the Cyber Ninjas days ago. Can we sue them for covering up the finding of the audit? Sue 12 News or Cyber Ninjas? Man, there's a lot of stuff in this comment. Thank you for first of all, Super Buff Shaft. Thank you for the mod love and the love our direction. It's true. We have the best mods. And thanks for being a membo and a major supporter over on the Rumble Premium, it looks like, as well. Awesome. So I don't know who you're referencing on who we can sue. I don't think we can sue ABC 12 News. Like, they're not obligated to cover anything. I think that's kind of the question. It's a question that comes up about the media a lot. And we talked about it on Locals. It was a great question. Somebody asked me this question. Does the media lie more by omission or commission? Do they lie by not covering things more or do they lie by covering things more? And I think it depends on your perspective, right? Like, does a lie require some active involvement? Are you lying by not talking about something that you should be talking about, maybe? Like a lie by omission? It's a complicated question. But yeah, great stuff. We're going to keep our eye on Arizona. And by the way, hey, I got a message. So if you're an Arizona lawyer, this is a great reminder. If you're an Arizona lawyer or a law student and you want to get connected with the Arizona GOP and the legal team who is going to be circling up here for this election, and you don't know how to do that, if you're a lawyer or a law student and you don't know how to do that, send me an email. Robert@spotlightlawyer.com. If you want to get involved, I can connect you with the people who are doing that. And we're trying to determine what our biggest value add will be. Is it me going and doing that, or is it us being here covering that? And I think it might be the latter. But I did get an email from the people who are organizing that, and so I can connect you. Send me an email, Robert@spotlightlawyer.com, if you're a lawyer or a law student and you know somebody and you want to volunteer around the election. We need you. So send that in. Thank you, Super Buff, for that one. We've also got Joel R. Hi, Rob. What's up, Joel? Good to see you, man. 3 exclamations. Thank you for those. 13 months as a membo. That's another baker's dozen in the house. Thank you, Joel. Patriot Rob says, why does anybody believe any of these next CIA X, whoever on news, on podcast, they're professional liars. That's their job. Once a spook, always a spook. Yeah, I do have questions about that. Like, people with CIA lineage in their background, I have active questions about that. And yeah, anyways. Brian Edwards. What's up, Brian Edwards? Thanks for becoming a supporter, Brian. We'll see you tomorrow on the members only morning stream. And if you missed this morning, Mayor Adams, we went through that full indictment today. Stan Kittrell says the Jason Bourne movies reflect what is going on. It's actually scary. The intelligence agencies are running the country, running the world, essentially, by taking people out and so on. Scary. NY says Trump Force 47 is here. Volunteer time, even if you're not in a battleground state. It seems like real humans are reviewing the submissions. They match you based on what you can offer that campaign. That's awesome. Yeah, so check that out. And I think even if you're out of state, they probably have it set up so you can do phone banking. Like if you're in, Arizona's a battleground state, but if you're in some other state, you can call into Arizona to then phone bank here. Maybe. I'm not sure. We'll see if that's a thing, but I think it might be. Elvis of Dallas, new supporter. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us, Elvis of Dallas. Thanks for becoming a membo. We'll see you on the membo stream. Patriot Rob says, wouldn't have been more appropriate for the Attorney General to bring these charges while the loan was still existent and not after the loan had been paid? Yeah, it was over. Everything was rectified. They had done business again after the fact. What's up, Elvis of Dallas? Elvis of Dallas became a membo and then brought in 10 new membos. Elvis of Dallas, thanks for doing that. What a way to come in. What a nice, warm welcome. bringing in 10 friends. Lisa Jean Williams coming in. James L is here. Agent K. We got Tyler Harden, John Oswald, William Selman, Jordan Sheen, Tom Harden, Kirk Hunley, and Dyer Gnome. Gifted members of our newest membo, Elvis of Dallas. Thank you, Elvis of Dallas, for bringing in 10 new membos and for joining us. Libby T, rounding it out. Thank you, Libby T. Have a great day, Libby. Is this emoji courtesy of Donut Mind Me? Man, so you guys are probably observing all of these great emojis or GIFs that we're adding in here into our comments, and those are coming courtesy of Donut Mind Me. So shout out to Donut for being amazing. Libby T, bringing in Kimmy, chair rocking, one crazy redhead, Ricky Grancy, and Robert Reiner joining us courtesy of Libby T. And thank you, Libby T, for being a membo and bringing in 5 new membos. And so, my friends, that was so nice. What a fun stream this has been. Thanks for bringing in new membos. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for being here. Thanks for subscribing and all the things. Let's say what's up to our friends on X. We are going over to Locals for our members only after party. We're going to hang out there, debrief, take a couple of comments, and see what's happening over there. Hey, here's some comments from Paul Mino, one of our meme smiths. You can see what's happening here. Merrick Garland is saying, work it out amongst yourselves. We've got General Milley pointing at the FBI, pointing at Nancy Pelosi. The DOJ's in charge of the whole thing, but he says, you guys just figure it out. I don't want anything to do with it. Jennifer says, did Christopher Miller commit actual treason by refusing to follow Trump's orders? Yeah, it's a great question. Seems like there was a lot of that going on. Trump said, do a thing, and they said, well, he's like acting secretary, so whatever, just kind of ignore him. Yeah, what's up? Al Holman says, yeah, value is always subjective. Unless it's a Tish James case, then she is the objective truth, and you cannot challenge that. It's Tish's world, and we're all living in it. Fred Pedamonte says, Clay Higgins said to Tucker that he knew that there were at least 200 CHSs on J6. That's insane. 50's insane. But if there's 200, oh my gosh. I actually think that's probably closer to true than 50. Between 200 and 50, I bet it's closer to 200. If we're playing The Price is Right, I go 50 or 200. The Price is Right. I'm going at 101 is where I'm going, right? If I'm the last one going, I'll take the upper on that because somebody's all probably 99. All right, you get the point. Anyways, what's up? Essential Bites is here. Says if they ignored Trump that badly, how much have they ignored Biden? Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, if they're not even following Trump and his orders, what else are they doing? It's a great point. Great comment. Okay, so my beautiful friends, oh no, Riley Leifson. We missed our baby's first birthday. Rob, you miss our baby's first birthday? Okay, send him some shirts. Wow, it looks like I've missed a lot of this child's life. We missed the 9-month birthday and apparently all the other month anniversaries since then. Terrible father. Terrible father. All right, so I'll work on it. Thank you for that, Riley Leifson. Happy birthday to our baby, and thanks for being a membo for 4 months. Appreciate that, Riley. All right, so my friends, it has been a beautiful stream. We covered a ton of ground. Thank you so much for joining us. We are going to go over to Locals, watchingthewatchers.locals.com. We'd love it if you joined us, but if not, well, we are going to be back here tomorrow. Oh, and tomorrow, we're going to have a special guest tomorrow. I'm very excited to talk to this guy. He is an ex-CIA lawyer. He wrote a heck of a new book. I'm going to read more of it tonight, and then we're going to be interviewing him tomorrow. It's going to be great. Ex-CIA lawyer, knows all the inside and out of the, well, CIA that he can talk about, knows people who were on that letter, the 51 intelligence agents signing off on that Hunter Biden letter. He's like, yeah, I know who those people are. So we're going to ask him all about it. So tomorrow's going to be a fun one. Will be an interview with this guy, and we're going to learn lots. So, my friends, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for being here. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for liking the video. and inviting a friend or family member to come over here and join us. We hope to see you over on Locals, but if not, we are going to be back here tomorrow to get into this all again. And in order to do that, we need to see you right back here so that together, with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night, my friends. Sleep very well. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye.